Under his kick, hundreds of top cultivators were caught off guard and were directly kicked back into the Immortal Array formation. Damn it! Before one of the Yen Immortals could finish his sentence, he was cut into palm-sized pieces by Jian Wushuang. All the Yen Immortals and peak cultivators subconsciously retreated. Looking at this god of death in front of them, they felt an inexplicable pressure. Jian Wushuang did not intend to waste any time. He lifted his leg and kicked another group of Yen Immortals and peak cultivators into the Immortal Array formation. At the same time, he stretched out his hand, and his 5 fingers merged together to form a sky-splitting palm that smashed down. The Immortal Array formation formed by nearly 10,000 immortal patterns could not withstand this power at all and collapsed. As the first Immortal Array formation shattered, only 3 of the original 4 Immortal Array formations remained. The headless armadillo bull had also fallen. It was like a shattered heavenly region, sinking into the shattered void. Jian Wushuang stood in the void and turned to look at the other 3 Immortal Array formations that were slowly opening. Such an Immortal Array formation, when stopped in time, had already killed close to 100 Yen Immortals and countless peak cultivators. If they did not stop it, the 6 Heavens realm would have been destroyed. Therefore, Jian Wushuang did not hesitate. He took the young emperor and went to the next Immortal Array formation. At this moment, the entire 6 Heavens realm had fallen into chaos. Even with Di Qing protecting them, the 6 Heavens realm could barely be defended. The original 60-plus Yen Immortal experts were now reduced to less than 30. With the addition of new blood, the original army had nearly 400 Yen Immortal experts. Furthermore, the Yen Immortal army had already known the importance and terror of Di Qing, so they no longer charged forward madly. Instead, they let the top cultivators who came later take the lead and exhaust the 6 Heavens realm's strength. Prince Qian's face turned pale. In his opinion, the 6 Heavens realm could no longer be defended. Moreover, he was already considering how to escape back to his ethereal immortal province as soon as possible. Chun Qing was fighting beside Di Qing and was clearly unable to escape. At this moment, several streaks of light rushed over from the 6 Heavens realm. They were Chun Qiu, Cui Jing, Zhao Ting, Wei Liujia, and a bald man who was as strong as a divine mountain. When they saw this scene, all of them had solemn expressions. Chun Qiu flew over to Chun Qing and said with a dark expression, "Why didn't you inform us about such a big thing?" Chun Qing touched the divine blood on his face and said anxiously, "The situation is too urgent. There's no way to escape. Even if I wanted to go back and call for you, there's nothing I could do." Chun Qiu's expression softened slightly. He looked at the turbulent situation and was about to speak again when an impatient roar rang out. "Where's my lord? Where did he go? Is he here too?" The person who let out the roar was the bald man, Fengshan. He roared with an extremely anxious expression. "Isn't this idiot the guy who was lying outside Brother Jian's palace?" Chun Qing was somewhat puzzled. The bald man, Fengshan, rushed to Chun Qing and said anxiously, "You must know where my lord is, right? Tell me quickly. I can't let my lord get hurt at all." Hearing this, Chun Qing stretched out his hand and pointed at the location of the 3 armadillo bulls in the distance. "He's right there." Before he could finish his sentence, Fengshan flew up. Although his body was extremely strong, his movements were also extremely agile. He rushed towards Jian Wushuang with great agility. "He's really a good-for-nothing." Chun Qing shook his head helplessly. Chun Qiu, Cui Jing, and the others were also preparing to go to Jian Wushuang's aid, but they were stopped by him. "Brother Jian is not in too much danger for the time being. Help relieve some pressure on me." Looking at Di Qing, who had a pair of wings on his back, Chun Qiu did not say anything. He summoned his 8-armed Arhat and stood in front of Di Qing to protect him. Cui Jing also joined the battle, holding the 8-foot-long black staff and fighting alongside Chun Qiu. Wei Liujia, who had not fully recovered, joined the battle without hesitation. He thought that he would be helping Jian Wushuang if he could protect the bottom line of the 6 Heavens realm. Zhao Ting also clenched her teeth slightly. After a moment of hesitation, she joined the battle. With Chun Qiu, Cui Jing, and the few Yen Immortals protecting him, Di Qing felt the pressure around him relax, allowing her to catch her breath. Chun Qiu's calmness, Cui Jing's boldness, Chun Qing's experience, and Wei Liujia's seemingly gentle yet deadly speed were all suitable for this chaotic situation. They were compatible with each other and had greatly offset the waves of impact. Even Di Qing was secretly certain of them. As Chun Qiu and the others joined the battle, thousands of streams of light emerged from the Six Heavens realm. They were the last remaining Yen immortals and peak cultivators of the Six Heavens realm. They were all cultivating in the Sword Discussion Dao field in the southernmost region of Little Lonely Heaven. But now they were all here. None of the peak cultivators and Yen immortals were absent. Stepping into this chaotic battlefield, all the Yen immortals and peak cultivators did not say a word, silently welcoming their fate. From a certain perspective, this was indeed a battle of fate. The sword cultivators all drew their true swords, and the top cultivators all released their most powerful Yen power. There were less than 10 Yen immortals who charged into the chaotic battlefield, killing the enemies and being killed. This was the purest war, and also the largest war since the establishment of the Great Sea region. There were close to 600 Yen immortals and countless peak cultivators participating in the battle, and there was an endless stream of Yen immortals joining the battle. This was also a war between imperial princes, and it involved 5 or even 6 imperial princes. This war was also the turning point of their relationship. The originally one-sided situation once again fell into a stalemate. Prince Qian's pale face eased a little, but he was still in shock. Where did the people under the young Emperor Prince Yen come from? They were so powerful that they could turn the tide of the battle on their own. Naturally, no one could answer Prince Qian. If he knew that these people who could turn the tide did not even listen to the orders of the young emperor, he would be completely shocked. The originally defeated situation was once again salvaged, and the chaotic battle was even more chaotic than before. If the void had color, the countless drops of divine blood would have dyed it dark red. The Yen immortals were constantly dying, and the ancestor-level cultivators were dying in batches. Not even their bodies could be preserved. This shattered void was the burial ground of the Yen immortals and top cultivators. A land of death of immortals, a pile of bones. The Yen immortals fought to the death, the top cultivators fought to the death. As far as the eye could see, the shattered void was filled with immortal bones and corpses. And this situation would only become more and more intense and would not end. This was because only one of the 4 immortal array formations had been destroyed at the source of the war. There were still 3 immortal array formations that were about to be activated and enter the explosive stage. Once the remaining 3 arrays were activated, everything would enter a dead end. Therefore, Jian Wushuang would never let that happen. After destroying the first immortal array formation, he immediately rushed to the second immortal array formation. He wanted to stop this battle from happening. Under the protection of Di Qing, the situation was in a stalemate. However, this situation could not last for long. Therefore, Jian Wushuang had to finish the battle quickly and then return to defense. As nearly 10,000 immortal patterns rotated, the second and third immortal array formations were about to be activated. Jian Wushuang had already arrived before the second armadillo bull. He held an invisible sword in his hand, and his entire body was like a peerless divine sword. He slashed at the armadillo bull's head fearlessly. The armadillo bull's body was simply too huge. It was even several times larger than some ordinary heavenly regions. This caused its movements to slow down. If it encountered a strong opponent, it would basically be waiting for death. Facing Jian Wushuang, the second armadillo bull also opened its mouth and swallowed him. The same scene happened again. Billions of beautiful lights exploded on the armadillo bull's head, eventually turning it into dust. Jian Wushuang held his sword and climbed to the top. He looked at the huge immortal array formation on the back of the armadillo bull and saw that it had been completely activated. There were already Yen immortals stepping out of the immortal array formation, rushing towards the battlefield. In just a few seconds, another 100 or so experts had joined the broken void battlefield. Furthermore, there was an endless stream of Yen immortals pouring out from the immortal array formation. The Six Heavens realm was in danger. Originally, there were still 300+ people in the Yen immortal army, but after the addition of the new blood, it was now close to 500. Jian Wushuang held the invisible sword in his hand and arrived in front of the second immortal array formation in an instant. He wanted to close the immortal array formation as soon as possible. However, this time it was not as smooth as the first time. Almost at the same time, the Yen immortals who walked out of the immortal array formation became alert and surrounded Jian Wushuang. "Are you a remnant of the Six Heavens realm?" A clear voice rang out. Then, a young Yen immortal expert wearing silver thousand leaves silver armor and holding a silver spear walked out of the immortal array formation and looked at Jian Wushuang arrogantly. Jian Wushuang glanced at him and used the seventh move of the flowing cloud grass sword style, folding grass and leaves. In an instant, boundless sword intent surged out from the blade, like green leaves, flying forward. The eyes of that youth brightened, his competitive spirit rose. He suddenly took a step forward and pointed the silver spear in his hand at the void. Then, he used his palm to block the spear and directly used a flat stab. This seemingly ordinary stab carried the momentum of a whale swallowing the galaxy and actually broke Jian Wushuang's flowing cloud grass sword style. At this moment, even the young emperor who was standing beside Jian Wushuang was extremely shocked. This was the first time that someone in the same realm as him had broken through Jian Wushuang's sword intent without much difficulty. Jian Wushuang was also slightly surprised. The young Yen immortal expert in silver armor and spear was able to find a way to deal with the flowing cloud grass sword style so quickly. It was indeed impressive. The entire flowing cloud grass sword style started from the seventh move, from simple to complex, and the sword intent contained within it was also close to majestic. And that youth used the simplest attack to break through the seventh move, folding grass and leaves. "Not bad, you can be my opponent." The young Yen immortal's eyes lit up, and he was ready to fight Jian Wushuang. However, Jian Wushuang did not want to fight him. His goal was the immortal array formations. The young emperor understood what he was thinking. He held his sword and faced the young Yen immortal. The young Yen immortal's eyes flashed with doubt. Then he seemed to have thought of something. "You are Prince Yen?" The young emperor ignored him and released his immortal style, attracting the attention of all the Yen immortals. "All Yen immortals, listen to my command. Kill Prince Yen with all your might." He suddenly raised the silver spear in his hand, and the earth-shattering sound echoed in the shattered void. At this moment, close to 100 Yen immortals gathered around. Jian Wushuang did not stay any longer. He jumped into the immortal array formation that was flowing with immortal patterns. The young Yen immortal who was fighting with the young emperor saw this scene and immediately guessed his intentions. He hurriedly shouted, "Don't just stand there. Protect the immortal array formation." Immediately, the group of evolved immortals chased after Jian Wushuang. This kind of immortal array formation that was built with tens of thousands of immortal patterns was extremely sturdy. Even the full power attacks of dozens of Yen immortals might not be able to break through its defense. Unless a grand Yen immortal attacked, the immortal array formation would be stable. However, Jian Wushuang could easily destroy the immortal array formation, so the only thing he was worried about was being obstructed. It seemed like the more worried he was, the more it would come true. When he appeared in front of the immortal array formation, 60 to 70 Yen immortals surrounded him, and thousands of peak cultivators also came over. This scene was extremely troublesome. Just as Jian Wushuang was about to rush out of the encirclement, a deafening roar resounded. "My lord, Protector Fengshan is late." Even Jian Wushuang felt his eardrums swell when he heard the explosion. By the time he reacted, he saw a blazing meteor-like figure break through the void and resolutely rush into the encirclement. There were over 10 Yen immortals who could not dodge in time and were sent flying 10,000 feet away. Rumble! The entire back of the armadillo bull was covered in cracks under this huge tremor. The encirclement was thrown into chaos, and the figure that came from afar climbed up from the back of the armadillo bull in a daze. Jian Wushuang's eyes twitched. "Why are you here?" "My lord, it's indeed you. Fengshan knew that you were here, so I came to protect you. Fortunately, I wasn't late." The bald man, Fengshan, ran over excitedly. Jian Wushuang was helpless. When he saw that the encirclement had become chaotic, he said in a serious voice, Get ready to rush out with me. As long as you rush out, you can follow me from now on. Fengshan accepts the order. My lord, just watch, Fengshan said excitedly. As soon as he finished speaking, his originally extremely sturdy figure instantly expanded several times. His entire body was like a divine mountain, filled with an intimidating aura. Then he charged forward like a small armadillo bull. In the next moment, the overwhelming yen power poured onto his body, scattering countless terrifying radiant energy. Even Jian Wushuang's eyebrows twitched when he saw this scene. This was a full-powered attack from dozens of yen immortals, as well as countless top cultivators. Even a beast like the armadillo bull, famous for its tough body, would not be able to withstand it. But in the next moment, a shocking scene appeared. Fengshan suddenly shouted. His sturdy body that was like a divine mountain suddenly doubled in size. At the same time, veins that were as thick as arms bulged out, and his skin turned dark green. All the attacks from the yen immortal and peak cultivators seemed to have lost their effectiveness. They actually could not leave any marks on his body. And my lord, hurry up and leave. He looked back at Jian Wushuang and roared. He had done his best. Jian Wushuang did not say anything. The invisible sword in his hand was extremely bright. Wushuang Sword Dao, Star River Lake Ocean Sword Intent. Second move. River. It was as if it was descending from the void dome, carrying endless sword intent. Every sword intent reflected a dazzling starlight and then swept over heavily. Under this sword, close to 1,000 peak cultivators and over 30 yen immortals were killed on the spot, and countless were heavily injured. Fengshan was stunned on the spot, looking at this scene in disbelief. The encirclement was completely disrupted. Live well. After Jian Wushuang said that to Fengshan, he stood in front of the Immortal Array formation with immortal patterns. In the Immortal Array formation, there was an endless stream of yen immortal and peak cultivators, but they were all kicked back by Jian Wushuang. Then, he stretched out his hand and released the immortal style. After the battle with Chong Duoling, all of Jian Wushuang's ancestral skills, immortal styles, and sword principles had been tempered. Therefore, the immortal style he released at this moment was even more majestic than before. Immortal style, Little Mountain River. With Jian Wushuang as the center, the surrounding void became his territory. In this territory, he could mobilize and transform any substance. A divine mountain directly tore through the void and pressed down, directly crushing the second Immortal Array formation. At this point, only 2 of the 4 Immortal Array formations were left. The Immortal Array formation collapsed and the boundless power spread out in all directions. This scene was taken in by nearly 100 yen immortals. Then, they all lunged at Jian Wushuang as if they had gone mad. Fengshan grimaced in pain. You dogs, you want to run after hitting me? Jian Wushuang did not stop. After destroying the second Immortal Array formation, he went straight to the third Immortal Array formation. The young yen immortal who was fighting with the young emperor saw this and immediately pushed the young emperor back with his spear. Then, he chased after Jian Wushuang in an instant. But then, a figure that looked like a divine mountain blocked their way. If you want to catch up, you have to step over me first. Fengshan's eyes were also extremely arrogant as he said disdainfully. The young yen immortal raised his eyebrows, pointing his silver spear at him. All of you, step over his body. Rumble. Nearly 100 yen immortals and countless top cultivators stepped over him. Looking at Fengshan, who was deeply embedded in the back of the armadillo bull, the youth shook his head. What a strange request. The third Immortal Array formation was already activated. As tens of thousands of immortal patterns circulated, many yen immortals walked out. Now that Jian Wushuang had destroyed only 2 Immortal Array formations, the chaotic battlefield had become a stalemate. In an instant, he arrived before the third armadillo bull. This time, he did not kill the armadillo bull, but directly arrived before the third Immortal Array formation. Just as he was about to slash down with his sword, there was a sudden sound of air being torn behind him. Jian Wushuang was forced to turn around and block it. The silver spear in the young yen immortal's hand stabbed over and the extremely swift and violent yen power burst out. Jian Wushuang was forced to take half a step back. I thought you were plotting something. So you want to destroy the immortal array formation. He tilted his long spear and said arrogantly, It's not impossible to destroy the immortal array formation, but you have to defeat me first and I'll let you go. How about it? Boring. Jian Wushuang retracted his gaze and turned to walk towards the immortal array formation. The young Yen immortal's gaze froze. You look down on me? As he spoke, his right hand formed the shape of a bow, and the arm that held the silver spear made a full circle. Then, as if he was shooting at the sun, he ruthlessly threw the silver spear. Jian Wushuang did not turn around, even though the spear behind him had arrived. In the next moment, a bull-like figure rushed into the encirclement and resolutely faced the silver spear that was flying towards him. A dark yellow energy that looked like the color of the earth gushed out and formed an impassable barrier in front of Fengshan. The spear that seemed to be able to pierce through the sky was actually unable to advance a few steps further when it collided with the dark yellow barrier. Fengshan roared, his feet digging deep trenches in the back of the armadillo bull. Then he shook his arms and sent the silver spear flying. Good fellow, your skin is really thick. Grabbing the silver spear that flew back, the young Yen immortal raised his eyebrows and looked at him. Make way, my target is not you. No matter who your target is, defeat me first. Fengshan spat out a mouthful of saliva and said, How foolish. The young Yen immortal shook his head. The silver spear in his hand shone brightly. 1,000 silver spear true souls appeared behind him, and they all shot towards Fengshan. The void collapsed, and each silver spear true soul was extremely violent. If it all fell on him, he would probably not be able to take it. Just as thousands of silver spear true souls were shooting down, Fengshan, who was still in a life-and-death situation, was suddenly pulled over by a stream of yen power. Rumble, the armadillo bull wailed as the 1,000 spears merged into one, carving out a deep ravine that was hundreds of millions of feet deep on its back, causing the void to tremble. My lord! Fengshan was shocked. After letting go of him, Jian Wushuang said solemnly, Follow me closely. Don't take any risks. He nodded heavily and followed closely. The immortal array formation was only a foot away, but with dozens of yen immortals guarding it, it was still extremely troublesome. Just as Jian Wushuang was about to unleash his strongest attack, the young yen immortal expert rushed over with his spear. Little rat, come and fight with me. If you win, I can give you this immortal array formation. Jian Wushuang looked back at him and said calmly, You will lose within 2 moves. 2 swords? How arrogant! The young yen immortal pointed his silver spear at him, his expression extremely arrogant. Forget about 2 sword strikes. Even if it was 200 sword strikes, you still wouldn't be able to defeat me. I'm invincible in the same cultivation realm. Jian Wushuang's lips curled up as if he had heard the funniest joke. Even Fengshan could not help but laugh heartily. Even if he was not lying and was invincible in the same realm, he had no chance of winning against Jian Wushuang. Before the battle began, Jian Wushuang was already strong enough to fight against a 3 revolutions grand immortal, the immortal lord of the 9 heavens, Chang Duoling. In other words, they were no longer equal opponents. Jian Wushuang was confident that he could defeat him in 2 moves. What, you don't believe me? The young yen immortal's brows raised as he asked coldly. Of course I believe you. If it was any other day, I might have a fight with you, but not now. Jian Wushuang glanced at him and then turned around. Fengshan tilted his head and spat. His immortal body doubled in size. When the young yen immortal saw this, he was furious. You dare to ignore me? In the next moment, he held his spear and flew toward Jian Wushuang's back. Jian Wushuang frowned slightly. Just as he was about to give him a thunderous blow, an extremely strange aura suddenly appeared. The aura appeared so quickly that Jian Wushuang did not even have time to react before it appeared on his back. TSK, TSK. Damn you, you won't be able to escape this time. The strange aura condensed into a black-robed figure. Its body was huge, and 2 black lights shot out from its eye sockets. The aura of death also soared into the sky. Jian Wushuang's eyes narrowed. This black-robed figure was the black-robed Grand Yen Immortal that he had killed previously. However, at this moment he actually appeared again. The black-robed Grand Immortal seemed to be unharmed. He extended two huge bone palms from under his black robe and held Jian Wushuang up before dragging him into the Immortal Array formation. Everything happened so fast that Jian Wushuang was dragged into the Immortal Array formation before he could react. Feng Shan also reacted instantly and rushed straight into the Immortal Array formation. "You have guts." The young Yen Immortal was furious. He raised his spear and charged into the Immortal Array formation. The immortal patterns circulated and absorbed their bodies in an instant, teleporting them to an unknown place. The battlefield was still chaotic, but no Yen Immortal noticed this change. As the third and fourth Immortal Array formations were completely opened, the entire Void battleground entered the most tragic and grand stage. More and more Yen Immortals walked out from the last two Immortal Array formations to join the battle. Just one Immortal Array formation alone had more than 300 Yen Immortals. At this point, close to 1,000 Yen Immortals charged toward the Six Heavens realm. Standing on the back of the dead armadillo bull, young Emperor held his sword and watched the scene unfold. The void gales tore everything apart. The complete destruction of the Six Heavens realm was a foregone conclusion. As the immortal patterns in the Immortal Array formation circulated, it seemed like a long time had passed, but it also seemed like only a moment. Jian Wushuang was transported to a heavenly domain. The strange black-robed Grand Yen Immortal that was restraining him had long disappeared, as if it had never appeared. His feet landed on the ground. He looked around and saw withered grass and dried rivers. They were the main colors of this heavenly region. The sky was extremely chaotic. The extremely dense death energy even covered and swallowed the scattered Yen power. Standing under the sky, an extremely strange and inexplicable atmosphere quietly pervaded the air. Just as Jian Wushuang was about to take a look, Feng Shan's huge body fell from the sky and landed heavily on the ground. "Io?" Feng Shan wailed in pain, rubbing his head as he got up from the ground. Immediately after, another Yen Immortal in silver armor and holding a silver spear descended from the sky. His expression was arrogant and puzzled. "What is this place?" Jian Wushuang glanced at him, but he had no intention of attacking. Coming to such a strange place, it was imperative to thoroughly investigate it. Feng Shan continued, "My lord, is this the lair of the guy who dragged you here?" "It's very possible." He nodded and looked into the distance. The withered grass extended all the way to the horizon. On the cracked and dilapidated land, there were many huge graves, almost uncountable. There were even many black and dilapidated coffins that were slanted on the ground, and the death aura was emitted from them. The pale white soul-beckoning banner rustled along with the wind, giving off an indescribable desolate and eerie feeling. Jian Wushuang felt that this extremely strange heavenly region was extremely similar to a place in his memory. That place was the God-refining sect in the Void universe, which was also where he was undercover. The God-refining sect used refined divine corpses as battle puppets. As long as the sect disciples could refine any divine corpse, they would be much stronger than Void masters of the same realm. It was because of this that the God-refining sect could be considered a super sect in the entire Void universe. The aura of death in this desolate and strange heavenly region was 100 times or even 1,000 times denser than the God-refining sect star field. Jian Wushuang began to suspect that there was an evil sect like the God-refining sect in this heavenly region. Just as he was at a loss, a strange laughter resounded throughout the entire heavenly region plain. "Not bad, not bad. Originally, I thought that it would be a great opportunity to swallow one of you. Now that two of you have come to my door, I will reluctantly swallow all of you alive." As the voice rang out, a huge, awe-inspiring face that was hundreds of millions of feet tall gradually appeared in the originally chaotic void. This huge face was like a taut skin on a skull. Its mouth was sharp and its cheeks were bulging. It was as ugly as a hairless monkey. Although his face had changed greatly, Jian Wushuang recognized the giant face at a glance. It was the black-robed Grand Yen Immortal who had died at his hands. When the young Yen Immortal saw this, he frowned and shouted, "Yu Yun, why didn't you go to the Six Heavens realm to fight?" Why did you return to your own heavenly region? In the sky, the huge face froze. When he saw this scene, he could not help but reveal a smile. I was wondering who it was. So it's great heavenly official Xu Yang. How is it? Are you satisfied with my heaven domain? The young Yen Immortal frowned. Cut the crap. Hurry up and follow me to the sixth heavens realm. No problem. But you have to eat before you can work. Right? The giant face revealed a strange smile. He suddenly raised the silver spear in his hand. Yu Yun, what do you mean? Nothing much. Actually, what I want to say is that since you've come to my territory, why don't you let nature take its course and become my nourishment to fill my stomach? The giant face suddenly laughed strangely and endless death chi descended from the sky. It was like 1,000,000 feet long chains that immediately wrapped around Jian Wushuang and the others. The young Yen Immortal called Xu Yang's eyes darkened. Yu Yun, you're courting death. In the next moment, the silver spear true soul condensed from the purest Yen power emerged from Xu Yang's back. It was thousands of meters tall. When the chains came down, they burst forth with the most magnificent light. The two collided, and a heaven-shaking force completely surged out, causing the chaotic sky to shatter. The silver spear true soul instantly shattered the endless chains and stabbed straight at the giant face. Whoosh! Like a hot knife cutting into butter, the silver spear true soul completely crushed the giant face and turned it into powder. Small tricks. Xu Yang snorted coldly. He was not afraid at all, as if he did not put the black-robed Grand Yen Immortal in his eyes. TSK, TSK, you can all die. The sky collapsed and a black-robed figure appeared. He slowly opened his arms and endless death energy came out from under his black robe. Here, I am the only heavenly Tao. Any Yen Immortal who tries to break the shackles will receive the most severe punishment. With him as the center, the thick death chi transformed into a barrier that trapped Jian Wushuang, Feng Shan, and Xu Yang. Damn dog! You actually dare to attack me in the face of a great battle? Xu Yang gritted his teeth. My lord, shall we charge out? Feng Shan looked at Jian Wushuang and asked nervously. Jian Wushuang did not speak. He sensed something unusual in the formation. That was the black-robed Grand Yen Immortal that he had killed. He had used some secret technique to survive and had used this extremely strange heavenly region to set up a death heaven array to trap them completely. Just as he said, in this death heaven array he was the only heavenly Tao. It was the easiest thing to trap a few Yen Immortals to death. However, he underestimated the variable which was Jian Wushuang. He had killed a 3 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal on his own. He had a great chance of winning against the weakest Grand Yen Immortal, even if the situation was extremely unfavorable to him. Xu Yang's expression was ugly. He naturally also realized how troublesome Yu Yun was. If he wanted to escape from here, it would probably be as difficult as ascending the heavens. Just as he was about to risk his life, Jian Wushuang moved. He did not release his Wushuang sword Dao or his ancestral skill. He just calmly stepped on the air. The black-robed Grand Yen Immortal, who was in the center of the death heaven array, subconsciously took a few steps back when he saw this. The red light in his eyes was somewhat evaded. Towards this young immortal who had struck him like lightning earlier, he had an inexplicable sense of fear and danger. If it was not for the life-saving secret technique that allowed him to escape, he would have been completely annihilated by now. I can kill you once, so naturally I can kill you a second time. If you let us leave now, I promise to spare your life. Jian Wushuang's calm voice resounded. He came before the black-robed Grand Yen Immortal and the distance between them was less than 30 meters. Otherwise, Chong Dwelling's fate will be your fate. His voice was not loud, but it exploded in Xu Yang's mind. A Yen Immortal dared to threaten a Grand Yen Immortal face to face? And he was fearless? Was this an illusion? Or did it really happen? Are you threatening me? The black-robed Grand Yen Immortal looked at him warily and said in a low voice, Not a threat, but a warning, Jian Wushuang said as he formed an invisible sword in his palm. The black-robed Grand Yen Immortal retreated quickly and his ferocious voice rang out. After entering my heavenly region, no one can leave. All of you will become nourishment for me. Stubborn. Jian Wushuang shook his head. Then he extended his hand and pointed. Without any warning, a divine river appeared in the Death Heaven array and swept toward the black-robed Grand Yen Immortal. Immortal style, Little Mountain River. Seeing this mysterious scene, the black-robed Grand Yen Immortal was shocked and hurriedly fled. The river swept out, tearing a crack in the Death Heaven array almost instantly, and swept forward without any reduction in its momentum. What are you waiting for? Let's help together. Do you want to be trapped here? Feng Shan shouted and then flew up. Xu Yang, who had recovered from his shock, had a sharp look in his eyes again. Facing the black-robed Grand Yen Immortal who was fleeing in panic, he exploded with a thunderous attack. The Death Heaven array, which was not very sturdy to begin with, shattered immediately, and that inexplicable restraint also completely disappeared. The black-robed Grand Yen Immortal's figure had already scattered into the void, but his voice still came over. Damned fellows, prepare to be devoured. As his voice fell, the originally dry and silent ground began to rumble and tremble. A thick, ink-like aura of death also gushed out from the cracks in the ground. The giant tomb exploded, and the coffins shattered. Figures that were almost condensed from death chi walked out of the ground and then flew into the sky. Each figure that was wrapped in death chi was a Yen Immortal. However, they were very different from ordinary Yen Immortals. Their bodies were emitting death chi, their eyes were blood red, and their exposed immortal bodies were covered by finger-thick dark red meridians. Seeing this scene, Xu Yang, who was holding the silver spear, gritted his teeth and said, "This Yu Yun is indeed abominable. Why? Do you know him?" Feng Shan looked at him and asked. Since they were on the same side, Jian Wushuang was not afraid that he would suddenly attack. Xu Yang took a deep breath and said, "I've also heard about it before. Yu Yun is a notorious evil immortal in this heavenly region. He absorbs the origin source and immortal source of top cultivators and even Yen Immortals to strengthen himself. He also transforms them into slaves for him to command. Now it seems that he is really as evil as the rumors say." Xu Yang's words were sincere and he did not seem to be lying. Jian Wushuang had more or less guessed some of the black-robed Grand Yen Immortal's dirty deeds. The death chi was so dense it was definitely related to him absorbing the origin of top cultivators and the immortal source of the Yen Immortal. For example, the 30 or so evolving immortals that surrounded him from all directions had all lost their immortal sources and were only driven by death chi. I have to be careful next. I heard that the slaves under Yu Yun can absorb anything, even the immortal source of the Yen Immortal. Once you are entangled by them, it won't be so funny anymore. If you don't want to become a slave like them, you have to do your best to break through this place," Xu Yang reminded, as if he was facing a great enemy. However, Jian Wushuang was not worried at all because he knew how to deal with this guy who could devour external objects to strengthen himself. There were quite a few peak cultivators or Yen Immortals who used this unique ability to cultivate their own techniques. This secret technique was extremely powerful. The only drawback was that the external force absorbed was too complicated, and it required constant time to digest and purify it. However, there was a simple and crude way to deal with peak cultivators or Yen Immortals who relied on this secret technique. That was to use all his strength to release his Yen power and cause his body to explode. This method was indeed feasible, but if he was not careful, it was very likely that he would be killed. Thus, even if a Yen Immortal knew of this method, he would not try it so easily. Facing nearly 30 death immortals, Xu Yang did not even dare to breathe loudly. They could not feel pain. Even if their limbs were cut off in battle, they could still release the last energy in their immortal bodies. TSK, be devoured in peace and become my slave. The black-robed great Yen Immortal Yu Yun appeared in the corner of the sky once again, looking at this scene with a dark gaze. Foolish fellow. Jian Wushuang shook his head slightly. He did not stop at all. He moved his body and faced the 30 death immortals resolutely. Ancestral skill, transcendence, heavenly gate. A magnificent heavenly gate materialized, and then a giant finger reached out from the heavenly gate and smashed toward all the death immortals. However, the nearly 30 death immortals did not dodge. They all opened their mouths and formed a strange suction force that actually devoured this ancestral skill. After they finished eating, the meridians on each of their immortal bodies emitted a strange brilliance. It was extremely strange. The next moment, a great battle erupted. They all pounced on Jian Wushuang and the others crazily and soon surrounded them tightly. Seeing this scene, Yuyun smiled smugly, but his smile did not even have time to completely relax before it froze. Tens of thousands of brilliant lights suddenly burst out from the encirclement, like the sun that could not be looked at directly, dazzling to the extreme. Then, the encirclement formed by nearly 30 Death Immortals shattered with a loud bang. Nearly half of the Death Immortals turned into powder on the spot and could no longer be resurrected. As the lights circulated, a figure with majestic divine patterns flowing around his body slowly walked out with an invisible sword in his hand. Xu Yang and Feng Shan followed closely behind, their eyes filled with extreme shock. They had originally thought that it would be a bloody battle, but it had actually ended in an instant. They only saw Jian Wushuang release his yen power once and everything was over. The encirclement was blown open, and only a dozen or so of the 30 Death Immortals were left. They were no longer able to do anything. When Yuyun saw the situation, he did not say any more harsh words and actually directly fled. The remaining dozen or so Death Immortals were all a little afraid and could not help but retreat. However, Jian Wushuang did not intend to let them go. In this treacherous heavenly region, any unstable factor was extremely important. Jian Wushuang reached out his hand and tied up all the Death Immortals. Then he crushed them into powder. Then he looked at the place where Yuyun disappeared. Then Jian Wushuang immediately chased after him. Feng Shan followed Jian Wushuang without hesitation. Xu Yang looked at the disappearing figure, his eyes burning with passion. A combative emotion surged in his heart. Yuyun's whereabouts disappeared very quickly, but Jian Wushuang soon found his escape route. This treacherous heavenly region could be considered a super-heavenly region. The entire heavenly region plane was several times larger than ordinary heavenly region. The extremely abundant yen power was replaced by a thick death aura. As they continued to move forward, the dilapidated hall and the towering tomb became the main color of this place. As for Yuyun's ghostly figure, he fled to a huge black mountain range. Jian Wushuang arrived in an instant. Looking at the desolate and strange mountain gate in front of him, he reached out and pointed. Immediately, a power that belonged to the suppression of the heavenly Tao laws directly cut the mountain range in half. In an instant, endless death qi gushed out from the mountain range, and the color of heaven and earth changed. Even Jian Wushuang had to release his yen power to protect himself from the corrosion of the death qi. As half of the mountain was cut off by Jian Wushuang, the scene inside was exposed. Countless dark caves appeared, and there were also dilapidated halls. It was extremely strange. Xu Yang and Feng Shan arrived shortly after. When they saw this scene, they frowned. "Looks like this place should be the Yuyun's home base," Xu Yang said with a serious expression. Jian Wushuang did not say anything and went straight to the mountain. Walking in the Black Mountain, the countless caves that were spewing out death qi were extremely mysterious. One could also see that the bones that had long lost their color were lying in front of the cave. Even the slightest breeze would turn them into ashes. This place was a complete purgatory. Jian Wushuang frowned. He felt endless resentment in the death qi. Just as he was moving forward, a hand suddenly reached out from a cave and grabbed his robe. "Help!" Jian Wushuang stopped Feng Shan and turned to look at the owner of the palm. It was a yen immortal, but his immortal source was already broken. It was like a skeleton. With a breeze, it could fall apart. His eyes were wide open, and he was about to die. Jian Wushuang waved his hand, and a wisp of yen power enveloped his body. In an instant, he, who was originally like a skeleton, was filled up in an instant, and even his cheeks were flushed. However, it was just the last moment. His immortal source had been shattered, and his divine body was in a mess. If Jian Wushuang had not given him a wisp of yen power, he would have died. Many thanks, sir, for allowing me to live for a moment." That yen immortal let out a long breath, as if he already knew his situation. Jian Wushuang looked at him and asked, "Do you have anything to say?" He nodded, and pain flashed in his eyes. Yes, what I want to tell, sir, is that you should go as far as you can now. This is a complete scam. The so-called path of becoming an immortal has always been a lie of that old dog. The price paid for this path of cultivation is too great. I was a disciple of a prosperous sect in the Qingyu heavenly region. Later, the sect master's wife left in a fit of anger, and the sect master sent 12 disciples to look for her. I was one of the 12 disciples. Due to my low cultivation level, it was very difficult for me to travel through the Qingyu heavenly region. Then, some unforeseen circumstances caused us disciples to get separated. I can't go back to the sect for a while, so I can only wander in Qingyu. I never thought that all of this would be the beginning of my nightmare. There was still some fear in his eyes as he said this. It was as if he could not forget that day even after so many years. Jian Wushuang did not interrupt his recollection. Somehow, he felt that there was a connection between them. He panted for a moment and continued. I was alone and wandering in the heavenly regions. I happened to come to a heavenly region with abundant energy. There, I saw a powerful Yen immortal who opened a Dao field and talked about the Dao. I sat down and listened to him. Soon, I was immersed in his discussion. He promised us that as long as we join him, any top cultivator with extraordinary talent will definitely reach the Yen immortal stage within a year. Even if they aren't top cultivators, they will develop immortal roots within a few years and reach unimaginable heights. During that debate, there were more than 100,000 top cultivators who followed him, and I was one of them. I thought that this was a path with a bright future, but I didn't expect that this path of cultivation would be beyond redemption. Jian Wushuang and the others could roughly guess what was going on. The person that this apex cultivator was talking about was definitely the black-robed Grand Yen Immortal Yuyun. He roamed the heavenly regions and opened up a wide Dao field, attracting wave after wave of top cultivators and even Yen Immortals to follow him. Then, he brought it to his nest and absorbed the origin to strengthen himself. The result was just as Jian Wushuang had expected. After Yuyun brought them here, he bared his fangs, tied them up, and sucked their origin. However, the process was 10,000 times crueler. After that old dog brought us here, he no longer hid anything. He directly divided us into 3, 6, and 9 grades. The lowest grade, the first grade, has a huge population of tens of thousands. That old dog slaughtered them all and made every cultivator into a soul amber, which he distributed to the mid-grade cultivators for them to absorb. After the mid-level cultivators were forced to consume these soul ambers, their strength increased rapidly. However, what awaited them were the top-level cultivators. That old dog did the same thing. After slaughtering all the middle-level cultivators, he made soul ambers and gave them to the top-level cultivators. As for me, because of my extraordinary talent, I was assigned to the highest level. Every 10,000 years, I have to absorb 100,000 soul ambers. During this period of time, my cultivation level increased greatly and I successfully broke through to the Yen Immortal stage. There are more than 50 people in the same situation as me. However, what awaited us was something even crueler. From then on, I knew that even if I became a Yen Immortal, I was just a chess piece. His eyes revealed a hint of bitterness. At the same time, his immortal body was rapidly drying up and was about to die. After becoming a Yen Immortal, I thought that I would have the ability to fight him. I didn't expect that I was still so powerless. All 50 of us were turned into praying mats by him, sucking our immortal source day and night. This situation lasted for several years. Those who had their immortal sources sucked dry were made into dead immortal slaves for him to command. They were beyond redemption. In order to not become his slave, I crazily devoured the immortal source of the other Yen Immortals and lived until the end. When he left, I also took the opportunity to escape from the cave. I wanted to leave this place completely, but I didn't expect my immortal source to be completely shattered. There's no way I can survive. If I didn't meet you today, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to say all these words. When he said this, his aura was already weak and gradually dissipated. This old thing is really a beast. He sacrificed so many top cultivators just for himself. He deserves to be cut into pieces. Feng Shan said hatefully and then looked coldly at Xu Yang. Why are you looking at me? I have never interacted with him before. I just heard about him, Xu Yang quickly explained. Didn't you see that guy even tried to kill me? Then why are you in the same camp? Feng Shan asked again. Xu Yang's expression was a little awkward, and then he said seriously, Forgive me for not being able to say anything, but since Yu Yun dared to attack me, then I want him to die under my spear. Feng Shan snorted and stopped talking. In his opinion, even Xu Yang's full strength could not even compare to Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang squatted down slowly and said to the Yen Immortal, You've been tired for so long. It's time to have a good sleep. He forced open his shriveled eyelids and forced a smile. Thank you, sir. It's time to have a good sleep. From the day I found my master's wife until now, I haven't had a good sleep. Now, I can finally sleep. What is the name of your sect? Jian Wushuang asked softly. He had asked this on a whim. It was as if he was opening up a memory that had been sealed long ago. Finally, he said slowly, My lord, it's called Xianxia Pavilion. It's located in Qingzhou, a very far away heavenly region. The scenery is very good. Master and mistress are very good to me. It's a pity that I won't be able to see them one last time. After saying this, the Yen Immortal finally died. His immortal body that could not hold on anymore turned into a pile of bones and scattered with the wind. Jian Wushuang's heart moved slightly, and his originally calm state of mind seemed to recall the past. That reckless, bold, and meticulous girl had walked out from the Qingzhou and followed Di Qing to Great Mi Heaven. Her name was Xianxia, the daughter of the sect master of the Xianxia Pavilion. The dead Yen Immortal was also one of the 12 disciples of the Xianxia Pavilion. Everything seemed to be so coincidental, but it also seemed to be in the unseen world. Jian Wushuang sighed and saw a finger-sized jade slip in the skeleton. He raised his hand and picked up the jade slip. He saw that the 2 words Shu Huan were engraved on it. After several years, it was still fresh. Perhaps this jade letter was the identity of the dead Yen Immortal. When he was enduring the torment, the one that supported him was probably the Xianxia Pavilion where he cultivated in his youth. Putting the jade slip in his bosom, Jian Wushuang turned around and looked at the dilapidated hall in the deepest part of the mountain range. His gaze was extremely cold. Rumble. The hall shattered, and even the entire mountain range could not withstand the power and collapsed. With Jian Wushuang in the lead, Xu Yang and Feng Shan used all their strength to bombard anything they see. Bastard! Hurry up and come out to die! Feng Shan roared and unleashed a series of extremely violent attacks that easily shattered anything that could be seen. Jian Wushuang held the invisible sword in his hand and walked towards the dark hall at the front step by step. In front of this pitch-black hall, under the huge and towering pitch-black pine tree, there were more than 10 broken immortal bodies guarding it. As far as the eye could see, the entire place was filled with deathly stillness and desolation. Immediately after, the sound of bones cracking could be heard. The broken immortal bodies guarding outside the hall moved at this moment. Without exception, they were all death immortals. Without their own consciousness, they were like corpses. Crack. The death immortal in the lead seemed to have died a long time ago. All that was left was his immortal bones. It could be said that he no longer had any combat power. Jian Wushuang walked at the front. He waved his hand and wiped out the death immortals who dared to come forward, leaving no trace behind. In an instant, the dozen death immortals had all disappeared. This huge hall was built on the endless mountain range. It was the center of the mysterious heavenly region and also the place with the thickest death qi. Feng Shan then stepped forward and protected Jian Wushuang. He rushed into the giant hall and started to wreak havoc. He had smashed a few large holes in the ceiling of the hall. A faint light shone in, and the scene in the hall could barely be seen. The hall was ancient, and the ground and walls were covered in deep red blood veins, making it look like a battlefield. Moreover, the blood veins seemed to be alive as they slowly squirmed. Pretentious thing! I'll kill you as well, Feng Shan said in a deep voice. As he opened and closed his palms, a vast ocean of derived energy poured out and exploded in the hall. Jian Wushuang suddenly had a bad premonition. However, before he could help, Fengshan was already in danger. Suddenly, millions of blood tendons were awakened like prey that smelled fresh blood. They covered the sky and covered the sun as they went to capture Fengshan. The great momentum of the yen power was devoured by the countless blood tendons. Then, he was entangled by the blood tendons and dragged into the abyss. Jian Wushuang's slash only cut off thousands of blood tendons and failed to stop it. Without any hesitation, he flew into the depths of the giant hall. Xu Yang's heart trembled and he followed closely behind Jian Wushuang. He couldn't explain why he did this and followed his instincts. The giant hall was broken, and there was a deep chasm in the deepest part. Even light could not shine in there. Countless blood veins as thick as real dragons were entrenched in the abyss, and it was extremely shocking. Jian Wushuang held an invisible sword in his hand and majestic divine patterns flowed around his body, preventing all filth from approaching. This abyss seemed to have no end, as if it was on the other side of the heavenly region. Boom! Shattered rocks flew everywhere. 2 blood veins that were several times thicker than a true dragon were cut off and fell to the ground, twisting crazily. Immediately after, a figure holding a long sword and flowing with divine patterns appeared. Xu Yang, who held a silver spear, followed closely behind. Beneath the abyss was a vast and boundless Tao field. No light could shine here, and it was extremely treacherous. In the center of the vast Tao field, Jian Wushuang saw a huge futon made of flesh and bones wiggling slowly. This huge praying mat was actually made up of death immortals. There were at least hundreds of them. At the same time, the black-robed Grand Yen Immortal Yu Yun was sitting on the futon. His withered face was staring at Jian Wushuang with hatred. "I miscalculated. I shouldn't have brought you into my heavenly region," he said fiercely. Jian Wushuang glanced at him and said coldly, "Cut the crap. Let him go and I'll spare your life." Yu Yun suddenly stood up from the futon, and red light shot out from his sunken eyes. "Are you sure you have me cornered? I can kill you the first time, so naturally, I can kill you the second time. Do you still want to try?" Jian Wushuang's eyes turned cold. "Then I'll give it a try today. If you beat me, I'll return him to you," Yu Yun shouted. His arms shook, and a blood tendon that was 1,000,000 feet thick appeared from the dark. Fengshan's body was firmly fixed at the top of the blood tendon, unable to move at all. Yu Yun wanted to say something, but Jian Wushuang obviously did not want to talk nonsense. He walked toward him with his sword. He was shocked and hurriedly controlled the endless death energy to respond. Crack, crack, the ground shattered and suddenly, giant claws emerged from the ground and clawed at Jian Wushuang crazily. Seeing this, Xu Yang hurriedly raised the silver spear in his hand and opened a path for him. Wushuang Sword Dao, Star River Lake Ocean Sword Intent. First move. Star. The sword intent of the majestic temple gathered into a line and slashed forward with a momentum that was as if it was splitting open the sky. The sword intent exploded out completely, and countless beams of light burst out along the way, shattering the giant claws that reached out from the ground. This sword attack had the highest AoE damage and could easily eliminate threats. Yu Yun was shocked. The sword intent that made him suffocate attacked again, and he was forced to attack. Standing on the high futon, he put his hands together and suddenly opened them. Devour! In an instant, the praying mat under his feet began to squirm. All the overlapping death immortals were struggling in pain. They opened their mouths and formed a strange suction force. Under this suction force, the sword intent was directly devoured. Jian Wushuang frowned slightly. He felt that something was wrong. Xu Yang came behind him and said solemnly, "There's something wrong with the futon that Yu Yun is sitting on. It can absorb all damage." He nodded, not in a hurry to make a move. At this moment, Fengshan, who was hanging on the blood tendon, shouted anxiously, "My lord, leave quickly. Don't stay here any longer. There's something wrong with this old thing." Before he could finish his sentence, Yu Yun stretched out his hand and released a ball of blood chi to knock him out. "How noisy!" Then Yu Yun gave a strange smile, and his figure disappeared in the air. Xu Yang's expression changed and he moved toward Jian Wushuang without leaving a trace. There was a natural chasm between the Grand Yen Immortal and the Yen Immortal, let alone a treacherous Grand Yen Immortal like Yu Yun. It could be said that as long as Yu Yun had killing intent, even if Xu Yang was invincible in the same realm, he could only die obediently, let alone fight against him. Xu Yang, who was proud and aloof by nature, did not doubt this at all. Therefore, he directly approached Jian Wushuang. This person was also in the Yen Immortal stage and could even be said to be his enemy, but now he felt a great sense of security. This is my home. I am the eternal heavenly Tao here. No one can hurt me. Now, be my nourishment with your devout faith. You are enough for me to make another breakthrough. As Yu Yun's voice resounded in the abyssal Tao field, the huge futon made of death immortals moved at this moment. Every death immortal was wailing in pain. It was as if they had suffered the most painful punishment before they completely died. Endless death chi spread in the center of the Tao field. Then the huge futon moved. All the dead immortals opened their blood-red eyes at this moment. The death immortals were not scary enough to be feared. They were not even as troublesome as Yen immortals of the same level. Because in the end, they were just the remnants of the immortal source devoured by Yu Yun. They were slaves without any senses. However, the power emitted by the praying mat formed by so many death immortals could not be underestimated. They wailed together and then flew up to Jian Wushuang. At the same time, an endless suction force gathered from all directions, crazily devouring all the Yen power. Even Jian Wushuang felt uncomfortable. This huge death immortal praying mat was really troublesome. He immediately released his ancestral skill to deal with it. Ancestral skill, Transcendence, Heavenly Gate. A vast amount of Yen power burst forth, and countless divine weapons flew out from the Heavenly Gate. They connected with each other and shot down boundless light. At this moment, all the death immortals in the death immortal praying mat raised their heads and opened their mouths to devour the Yen power. To Jian Wushuang's surprise, the move was completely devoured. At this point, the death immortal praying mat had already reached its maximum size, and it wailed as it pounced at him once again. Xu Yang's expression changed drastically. He was already prepared to fight to the death. However, Jian Wushuang was one step ahead of him. He leaped forward, and the invisible sword in his hand was extremely dazzling. In the next moment, the Wushuang sword intent lit up the entire Tao field under the abyss. Jian Wushuang's calm eyes only focused on this ordinary sword attack. The two collided, but there was no earth-shattering scene. In fact, there was no loud sound. This ordinary sword strike was a supreme sword strike, the strongest sword strike. No one could block it. The death immortal praying mat, which was originally filled to the extreme, exploded with a loud bang. It exploded into countless pieces of limbs. Under this sword strike, the death immortal praying mat dissipated. Xu Yang widened his eyes and looked at Jian Wushuang's back in disbelief. A huge question arose in his heart. They were both Yen immortals, but why was there such a huge difference? After killing the death immortal praying mat, Jian Wushuang went straight to Fengshan. He wanted to save him. However, something unexpected happened. Yu Yun, who had disappeared, reappeared at this moment and looked at Jian Wushuang with a faint smile. "Get lost!" he shouted sternly and slashed the long sword in his hand at Yu Yun. Crash! Under this sword strike, Yu Yun's figure was directly shattered, and then he was split into two. "Idiot! You're just a mere Yen immortal, and you want to kill me in my heavenly region?" Jian Wushuang ignored him and continued to slash. With each of his strikes, Yu Yun's body would shatter, but then another one would split. Soon, there were nearly 100 Yu Yuns surrounding Jian Wushuang. "Danger, run!" Seeing this scene, Xu Yang warned in shock. However, it was already too late. Nearly 100 Yu Yuns all grinned hideously and opened their palms, blasting out a fatal blow. It was a full-powered attack from the Grand Yen Immortal. The endless death chi light pillar bombarded Jian Wushuang from all directions. Rumble! The entire geocentric abyss was completely shaken. Even Xu Yang could not stand firm here and could only self-destruct. The explosion lasted for a long time until everything returned to normal. Then, a body riddled with holes fell from the sky and half knelt on the ground. Divine blood flowed out of the broken body like a stream, soaking a large area of the ground. At this moment, Jian Wushuang's immortal body had been shattered to the extreme. If he went one step further, his immortal body would probably be completely shattered. In the end, he was still careless and underestimated the true strength of a Grand Yen Immortal. No matter how weak Yu Yun was, he was a genuine Grand Yen Immortal and could easily injure Jian Wushuang. However, Jian Wushuang still had not crossed that hurdle. When Xu Yang saw this scene, his expression was extremely solemn. Then, he quickly regained his composure. He held the silver spear in his hand and directly rose into the air to face Yu Yun. A mere heavenly official like you dares to stop me? Yu Yun looked at him coldly. Xu Yang snorted coldly and said, Yu Yun, you have to remember, now is the time to fight with the Six Heavens realm. It's not the time for you to be impudent. What do you have to do with me? You're just a lackey of Prince Hua. How dare you lecture me? Yu Yun shouted sternly. He took a step forward, and endless pressure swept over. Xu Yang gritted his teeth and resisted this pressure. He suddenly pointed his spear at him. Yu Yun, don't go overboard. So what if I went overboard? Do you believe that even if I kill you right now, Prince Hua won't punish me? Yu Yun smiled sinisterly, and a huge shadow appeared behind him. Hatred rose in Xu Yang's eyes. Then let's see how you can hurt me. A fierce battle erupted in the air again, but it was a one-sided battle. Yu Yun was like a cat catching a mouse, toying with Xu Yang in the palm of his hand. The insurmountable gap between the Grand Yen Immortal and the Yen Immortal made him calm. At this moment, Jian Wushuang was half kneeling on the ground. His immortal body was recovering quickly, but it still needed some time. He gritted his teeth, and his shattered immortal body began to grow flesh. At this moment, an extremely weak but abrupt voice sounded from behind him. You're wasting your energy like this. He can't be killed at all. Jian Wushuang turned around abruptly and saw a death immortal with only a head left crawling towards him. Don't worry, I'm different from them. I'm not completely dead yet. I still have the last bit of divine sense. This death immortal's head was indeed different. There was a pair of crystal-clear eyes in his eye sockets. I was one of the top cultivators who was tricked by him to come here. Now, they are all dead, but I am still alive. The reason why I still have the last bit of faith to live on is because I want to tell his weakness to the expert who can kill him. Fortunately, I waited. The death immortal's head came to Jian Wushuang and his eyes were full of vigor. What I know is that he doesn't have a main body, he's in the form of a ghost. None of the attacks from the Yen Immortals were able to kill him. But I know how to kill him completely. I've been enslaved by him until now, and I know his biggest secret. He doesn't have a true body, but he is an illusion. I once saw him take out an ancient book. Now that I think about it, it must be his origin. If you can find that ancient book, you can completely destroy him. Jian Wushuang looked at him and asked after a while, Where is the ancient book? In this Dao field. It depends on whether you have the ability to destroy this place. The head said slowly. Can you do it? The undying and imperishable immortal body had already completely recovered. The damage that Yu Yun could inflict on him was extremely limited, and it was even far inferior to Chang Duoling. Therefore, Jian Wushuang was able to recover quickly. After listening to the Death Immortal's head, Jian Wushuang asked, Can you tell me the exact location? Of course, that ancient book should be under you. I hope you can destroy it. This is the last thing I can tell you. The Death Immortal's head gradually collapsed and finally turned into a handful of ashes, disappearing. Jian Wushuang stood up slowly and looked at the scene in the sky. Then he condensed an invisible sword in his palm. The next moment he thrust his sword at the ground. Boom! The sound of a collapse from the depths of the earth rang out. With a single sword strike of 1,000,000 feet, the entire earth's core beneath the abyss was dug apart by this sword strike of his. Yu Yun, who was about to kill Xu Yang with a palm strike, changed his expression and dashed toward Jian Wushuang. You want to leave? I won't let you have it easy today even if I have to die. Xu Yang was covered in blood. He held his silver spear and blocked in front of Yu Yun. Trash! You overestimate yourself. Yu Yun was furious and directly slapped him flying. However, a tall and strong figure that looked like a divine mountain blocked his way and spat fiercely. Old bastard! Grandpa's still here. Yu Yun almost went crazy. Facing Fengshan, he directly released endless death qi. Fengshan and Xu Yang could only stop him for a few dozen breaths, but it was also time for Jian Wushuang to fight. Jian Wushuang had almost dug up the entire Earth's core. Under the cold and dry core, a red light suddenly flashed and lit up the entire abyssal Dao field. Yu Yun's face was ashen as he instantly rushed towards the red light. However, it was too late. Jian Wushuang reached into the red light and took out something. No, don't! He was extremely terrified, but he did not dare to take another step forward. When the red glow completely dissipated, a tattered ancient book fell into Jian Wushuang's hand. Reversal Death Scripture. There were only these 3 strange words on the entire ancient book. Other than that, there was nothing else. Return it to me and I will let you leave, Yu Yun shouted in horror. Jian Wushuang ignored him and flipped to the first page of the ancient book. Red light flowed, and a picture of an ugly ghost engraved on a page entered his eyes. Yu Yun? Ghosts? Could he be the ghost on the first page? He thought. However, Yu Yun could not wait any longer. He pounced on Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang no longer hesitated and directly tore off the first page of the reversal death scripture. You deserve to die. Yu Yun was in complete despair. His entire body was instantly shattered without leaving any traces. At the same time, the endless deathly aura began to dissipate, and the entire Dao field began to collapse. Yu Yun's sudden death on the spot was simply inconceivable to the extreme. Everything happened so fast that Jian Wushuang could not believe it. He had merely torn off the first page of the reversal death scripture and a Grand Yen Immortal had died just like that. Jian Wushuang quickly came back to his senses. He looked at the page he had torn off and realized that it had become a yellow piece of paper. Everything had reversed too quickly. Yu Yun died on the spot, and the death qi supporting the Dao field had all dissipated. He could no longer stay in the abyss for long. Jian Wushuang did not have time to think about what had happened. He stuffed the ancient book into his pocket and urged Fengshan to leave. My lord, what should we do with this fellow? Fengshan wiped the blood off his face and pointed at Xu Yang, who was lying on the ground. Jian Wushuang did not say anything. Saving this guy was equivalent to saving an enemy. However, he did not hesitate. He released his yen power to wrap it up and flew out of the earth abyss. The endless death aura had already dissipated, and the originally chaotic sky had returned to its original color. However, the ground was still dry and withered. It would probably take a long time for it to recover. As a Grand Yen Immortal's Dao field, this heavenly region was filled with bones. Countless peak cultivators and Yen Immortals had fallen here. Jian Wushuang had intended to destroy this heavenly region, but he decided not to do so. Yu Yun had completely fallen, and there was no possibility of recovery. The energy contained in the reversal death scripture was probably beyond imagination. Jian Wushuang did not plan to study it immediately. He had more important things to do. Standing in the sky, Xu Yang had almost recovered. Facing Jian Wushuang, he cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for saving my life. Xu Yang will never forget it." Jian Wushuang waved his hand. How's your recovery? Xu Yang said. Not bad. I can protect myself now. Then can you return to your own heavenly region? Xu Yang did not reply. After a while he said, Xu Yang has been defeated. He no longer has the face to attack the Six Heavens realm. I shall return to my heavenly region immediately and never step into the Six Heavens again. But before that, I have to return to the Six Heavens realm with you and recall my Yen Immortal subordinates to not participate in this battle. Jian Wushuang looked at him, puzzled. Xu Yang smiled bitterly. The reason why I did this was to recover some of my losses. I now understand one thing. With you around, the Six Heavens realm will probably be hard to destroy. Hearing this, he nodded. Sure. After you follow me to the battlefield, Recall your subordinates and leave immediately. I won't stop you. Xu Yang nodded. Then, as if he had made a decision, he asked tentatively, "Can you tell me your name?" After blurting out the sentence, Xu Yang quickly regretted it. After all, their relationship was originally enemies. Asking for their names like this was simply a sign of ulterior motives. However, Jian Wushuang did not care. "You can call me Wushuang. That's my name." "Wushuang," Xu Yang repeated, then cupped his hands solemnly. "Brother Wu, I'll remember it. If we meet again in the future, I'll definitely invite you to drink to your heart's content." Jian Wushuang waved his hand again. "There's no need to drink to my heart's content. I just hope that the next time we meet, it won't be on the battlefield." Feng Shan grinned. "Even if we meet on the battlefield, you won't be able to do anything. When the time comes, I'll definitely beat you to a pulp." Xu Yang smiled bitterly. No one knew where they would meet next. Perhaps it would really be on the battlefield. Being unable to control oneself was the true reflection of being a great heavenly official. It had been quite some time since Jian Wushuang was dragged into this heavenly region by Yu Yun. The most urgent thing now was to return to the Six Heavens realm battlefield and turn the tide. The entire battleground was in complete chaos. The flames of war had spread to all the domains outside the Six Heavens realm. Nearly 100 heavenly regions had been destroyed in this battle. The boundless void was shattered, and the yen power mixed with the violent gales almost turned this place into a purgatory. At this moment, the last two immortal array formations had been completely opened up. Close to 800 yen immortals had attacked for 6 days. Even the void could not withstand the impact of so many yen immortals and was shattered. They were all attacking the same place in an extremely crazy manner. However, what could be seen was that these 800-plus yen immortals, as well as countless top cultivators, were all gathered in front of the Six Heavens realm's entrance. It was difficult for them to advance any further, as if they had fallen into a fierce battle. There were constant yen immortals and large batches of top cultivators dying. Their immortal bones were scattered in the void and then shattered. In this great battle, there was one figure that was the most dazzling. He had 10 wings on his back, and each wing was of a different color, releasing a terrifying power. Every time he attacked, he would crush the yen immortals who dared to come forward into dust. The entire Six Heavens realm was protected by him alone. Beside him, there were less than 20 yen immortals left. 20 against 800, this was unimaginable. Prince Qian was also forced to join this battle. The 100 yen immortals he brought were all dead. He was trapped in this battle and had no way to escape. At this moment, he almost wanted to slap himself a few times. He thought he was smart enough to make this decision, but he did not know that he was walking towards a dead end. If not for Di Qing's protection as the last line of defense, they would have died hundreds of times already. Among the remaining 20 or so yen immortals, Chun Qiu, Chen Qing, Cui Jing, Zhao Ting, Wei Liujia, and the others were all spent. If they continued to fight like this, there would only be one outcome. They were all destroyed. Over 800 yen immortals, this was too terrifying. One had to know that even the most ordinary yen immortal had the ability to destroy a heavenly region. They were all above the heavenly Tao and could even form the heavenly Tao. Now that they were all gathered here, no one could stop them. Di Qing's life was damaged. He was barely able to withstand the attacks of 800 yen immortals by himself. However, he still persevered until that figure appeared. "Let's retreat. We can't keep the Six Heavens realm anymore." Prince Qian looked at Di Qing and said in a trembling voice. Di Qing glared at him coldly before continuing to unleash his unparalleled strength. Swallowing his throat, Prince Qian did not dare to speak anymore. He could feel the killing intent in Di Qing's eyes, and he did not care about his identity as the prince at all. Thinking of this, he gritted his teeth and once again fought with all his might. With Jian Wushuang's disappearance, the entire battlefield entered the most chaotic state. The young emperor stood in the void in a daze. He was already surrounded by close to 100 yen immortals. It was hard for him to escape. However, none of the yen immortals surrounding him dared to step forward. Their eyes filled with hesitation. Every single yen immortal who came to the Six Heavens realm knew who this handsome and sinister young man in luxurious clothes was. Because of this, no one dared to step forward. After all, he was the young emperor under Jin Wuyang. He held a flexible sword in his hand, his gaze slowly sweeping across all the Yen immortals in front of him, as if he wanted to remember them all. At this moment, the void in front of him rippled and a black robe appeared. As soon as the black robe appeared, a powerful aura that could not be detected spread out. That was the aura of a grand Yen immortal. Then, he slowly walked forward and reached out to grab the young emperor's neck, lifting him up. "Prince Yen." A playful voice sounded from under the black robe. Then, the hood was slowly pulled down, revealing an extremely old and skinny face. This extremely old grand Yen immortal had a clean face without a beard and his eyes were cloudy. It was as if he had lived for countless years and his body had a strange aura that was decaying with time. The young emperor looked at him coldly without any expression. Then, the grand Yen immortal slowly said, "Before you die, do you have anything else to say? Do you think you are worthy of killing me? Do you dare to kill me?" The young emperor smiled sinisterly, his eyes filled with madness. "Why wouldn't I dare?" He smiled as well, and his empty right hand suddenly released his Yen power, which directly bombarded the young emperor's immortal body. His immortal body shattered, and divine blood gushed out. A hideous wound was directly blasted open in his abdomen. "Delightful. Old dog, continue attacking. I'll see if you have the guts to attack again today." There was no pain on the young emperor's face. Instead, he smiled sinisterly. "If you don't kill me today, I'll make sure you have no way to live and no way to die in the future." The old grand Yen immortal turned his turbid eyes to look at him. "You can't die now. When everything is settled, I will personally come and take your life." After saying this, he directly reached out and threw him into the void. Then his figure disappeared. The battle continued. More than 800 Yen immortals and countless top cultivators had already devoured the remaining forces of the Six Heavens realm. Even Di Qing was unable to turn the tide. There was nothing they could do. However, Di Qing gritted his teeth. His Yen power was about to run out, and when he faced the encirclement of over 800 Yen immortals, he might lose another life. "Wushuang, where did you go?" His voice quickly entered the ears of Chen Qing and the others. Chen Qing, who had just returned from Jian Wushuang's side, said, "Brother Jian went to destroy the Immortal Array formation. However, it seems that he has encountered some unforeseen circumstances." "Impossible. Brother Jian will definitely be fine. He will be back soon." Chun Xiu was covered in blood, but his tone was firm. "I will wait for Big Brother Jian to return." Cui Jing gritted his teeth. He had just entered the Yen immortal stage not long ago and his foundation was the weakest, but he was still persevering. Di Qing did not say anything else. He believed that Jian Wushuang would return soon. He had been waiting for Jian Wushuang. He flapped the 10 wings on his back and layers of golden light descended. Anyone who got close would be heavily injured, even if it was a Yen immortal, but now it was gradually weakening. Just as Di Qing was about to summon the image form, a strong premonition suddenly rose from the depths of his heart. Being able to walk out from the era when Jin Wuyang proclaimed himself emperor, his divine sense was already extremely powerful. He could sense danger coming from any direction. In the next moment, Di Qing did not hesitate. He released all of his Yen power and the 10 wings on his back closed at the same time to protect his immortal body. The void shook violently. All the Yen immortals and peak cultivators felt the void suddenly become sticky. It was as if time had stopped for a moment. Then, a black light that could tear the void flew across the entire battleground at an unimaginable speed and shot toward the beautiful figure. It was as if the heavenly Tao had collapsed and the great sun had withered. A crisp cry resounded in the void battleground. Di Qing's precious image form shattered, and countless golden lights retreated from his immortal body. His magnificent 10-sided wings also withered and shattered. All the Yen immortals could clearly see that there was a huge wound on Di Qing's heart. Pure golden blood flowed out, dyeing the shattered void with color. Prince Qian, Chun Qing, Chun Qiu, Cui Jing, Wei Liujia, Xiaoting, and the others all had ashen expressions. Even the few remaining Yen Immortals and the less than 1,000 peak cultivators were in despair. Every Yen Immortal and even peak cultivator knew that the reason why they could persist until now was because of Di Qing's existence. Now that Di Qing was severely injured, everything was finally coming to an end. Cough, cough. Coughing out a mouthful of golden blood, Di Qing's aura became weak and his eyes began to tire. He could no longer hold on and fell into the void. Chun Xiu was the first to react. He instantly arrived in front of Di Qing and held him up. He took out a large number of emperor-grade pills from his chest and stuffed them into Di Qing's mouth. "Don't resist. Eat them all," Chun Xiu said in a trembling voice. As soon as the D-tier pill entered his mouth, it turned into rays of light that drilled into his body and began to rapidly repair the heavily injured areas. Di Qing, who had almost died, was able to extend his life and his aura stabilized. However, he was still in a state of uncertainty, as if he could die at any moment. The broken void battleground fell silent. The 800-plus Yen Immortals were like a collapsing mountain, silently walking toward them. The indescribable aura almost made the Six Heavens realm on the verge of collapse. Immediately after, an old black-robed figure appeared in front of the huge Yen Immortal army. He slowly walked forward, his turbid eyes filled with satisfaction. "I didn't expect that there would be a 9 revolutions grand Yen Immortal in this small void battleground. What I didn't expect was that I killed a 9 revolutions grand Yen Immortal by myself." As he said this, his turbid eyes were filled with arrogance. This was indeed an honor. He was merely a 3 revolutions grand Yen Immortal, yet he was able to kill a rank 9 revolutions grand Yen Immortal. If this matter spread, it would be his most glorious battle. Chun Qing slowly took a step forward and looked at him with a gloomy expression. "Shameless person, actually doing something like a sneak attack. Although you are a grand Yen Immortal, you are not even comparable to a beast." When the old grand Yen Immortal heard this, he flicked his finger. In an instant, Chun Qing's expression changed. His right arm, which was holding the sword, was directly crushed into powder. "You, a puny little Yen Immortal, dare to challenge me? No respect," he snorted coldly. Cui Jing stood up at this time and looked at him proudly. His words were full of disdain. "I'm not going to be nice. An old thing like you, all you can do is a sneak attack. If we fight in the open, you're not worthy at all." The extremely old grand Yen Immortal had not been angered in years. This time, he was completely enraged. He did not expect that these ant-like fellows would actually dare to talk back to him. How could he not be ashamed and angry? "You're courting death." The old grand Yen Immortal flicked his finger and Cui Jing was heavily injured. Divine blood gushed out of his 7 orifices. "Today, none of you will live." After he finished speaking, he pointed his finger and Chun Qiu, Xiaoting, Wei Liujia, and the others were all heavily injured. The remaining Yen Immortals in the 6 Heavens realm could not get up at this moment. The suppression of a grand evolution immortal on a Yen Immortal was too terrifying. He only moved his finger and the Yen Immortal was heavily injured. No more Yen Immortal could stand up. The 6 Heavens realm gates opened. The old grand Yen Immortal's eyes were filled with contempt as he looked ahead. He only needed to destroy the 6 Heavens realms to complete the mission. Just as he was about to destroy 6 Heavens, something unexpected happened. Facing the overwhelming army of Yen Immortals, a skinny top cultivator walked out. He drew the true sword hanging from his waist and looked ahead solemnly. Seeing this scene, all the Yen Immortals felt that it was absurd. Even the old grand Yen Immortal was extremely surprised. This cultivator who had just entered the entry Yen stage actually dared to step up to face 1,000 Yen Immortals? One had to know any random Yen Immortal could crush him as easily as crushing an ant. However, he still did not run and stood up resolutely. He held the sword hilt with both hands and pointed the sharp blade forward. This ordinary-looking, thin top cultivator was Su Jin. Looking at this ridiculous scene, the old grand Yen Immortal seemed to be interested. He waved his hand and 3 peak cultivators who were also in the entry Yen stage flew out and stood in front of Su Jin. Su Jin took a deep breath and stepped forward with his sword. One top cultivator against three top cultivators. This was almost a result without suspense. However, Su Jin stood up alone. He had nowhere to retreat, and he knew what would happen to him. In the next moment, the three top cultivators moved at the same time. Several streaks of yen power burst out from their hands and shot forward. Pointing his long sword forward, Su Jin seemed to have entered some kind of ethereal state. Even his breathing had disappeared. All the yen immortals looked at this farce-like scene with mocking expressions. However, the expected result did not appear. The streak of yen power, which combined the power of three top cultivators, shattered inch by inch when it hit its target. Some attentive yen immortals noticed that the violent energy did not break on its own, but was shattered by the dense sword intent. That swordsman was not simple. The three top cultivators also noticed this change, but none of them took it to heart. They all charged at Su Jin. The whole sword style of Flowing Cloud Grass Sword was made up of 9 moves, from simple to complex. So far, only Jian Wushuang had mastered it. As for Su Jin, who was slow in talent and had poor control over his yen power, he had only cultivated to the 3rd move. How powerful could the 3rd move of Flowing Cloud Grass Sword be? At this moment, Su Jin had long forgotten all the dangers. His eyes were only on the sword in his hand. At the same time, his divine sense was deducing the sword Dao over and over again. Flowing Cloud Grass Sword, 1st move. Star Bind. This was the most basic sword move that laid the foundation for the entire sword intent of the Flowing Cloud Grass Sword, starting from simple to complex. The true sword extended forward, and the simplest horizontal slash was the intent of Star Bind. The void fluctuated, and the sword intent shone brightly. The 3 top cultivators who flew over felt that something was wrong. They hurriedly retreated, but they were still half a step too late. Swish! The sound of cloth being torn apart resounded, and a long and narrow hole was opened in the void. The 3 top cultivators who retreated all looked at him solemnly. At this moment, there was a scarlet line of blood on the same spot on their cheeks, and divine blood was dripping from the wound. An ordinary horizontal slash had injured the 3 top cultivators. They all felt the palpitating sword intent, but they were still unable to dodge it. If they had not stopped in time, the consequences would not have been just this. Motherfucker, you're courting death. One of the youngest top cultivators was furious. He wiped the divine blood on his face and rushed forward. Su Jin raised his eyebrows. Facing this powerful top cultivator, he had no fear. Flowing Cloud Grass Sword, 2nd move. Moon Link. The true sword slashed straight down, taking advantage of the remaining power of the previous move, Star Bind, to erupt with the coldest sword attack. The cultivator smiled evilly as if he was prepared for this. He shook his arms and created a barrier around his body to counter the attack. In the next moment, the two collided. The thin Su Jin was directly sent flying 1,000 feet away. Even the true sword in his hand almost fell off. The top cultivator stood rooted to the ground and laughed loudly. Cough, cough. Su Jin slowly straightened his body, wiped the divine blood from the corner of his mouth, and looked at him calmly. A shocking scene appeared. The top cultivator, who was originally laughing loudly, suddenly shut his mouth. His expression was solemn as he looked at his chest in disbelief. His heart was pierced through by a sword, and his life source turned into mottled starlight that quickly seeped out. No, that's impossible. How can my life source be damaged? He was extremely terrified and then died. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. In just one exchange, he had killed a top cultivator of the same realm. No top cultivator dared to underestimate such combat strength. The remaining 2 top cultivators had extremely grave expressions. Clearly, the death of their companion had given them great pressure. The 2 of them looked at each other and then moved at the same time. They directly flew towards Su Jin and exploded with their strongest attacks. The void trembled as 2 boundless energies arrived. Su Jin took another deep breath. He had relied on the 2nd move of the Flowing Cloud Grass Sword to kill a top cultivator of the same realm. He was not familiar with the 3rd move, so he was afraid that he would not be able to unleash it to its fullest. Even though he was thinking this, he still released the 3rd move. Water Travel. The third move, water travel, was actually a move that combined the two sword intents and used them. Although it seemed simple, it contained a myriad of hidden meanings. If one was not completely familiar with the first two sword intents, one would not be able to unleash them at all. As soon as the water travel sword intent was released, the entire void seemed to turn into a spring. The two peak cultivators who had been going all out felt like they were drowning when they stepped in. They were suddenly bound and could not even release their yen power. It was in this short moment that Su Jin's thin figure arrived. He held a true sword in his hand, as if he was the heavenly Tao that was in charge of punishment, and he began to harvest. The void was silent. At this moment, the eyes of all the peak cultivators and even the Yen Immortals who saw this scene lit up. Even the old Grand Yen Immortal with cloudy eyes looked at Su Jin. It was because this sword strike was simple and clear, but it was also extremely stunning, making everyone who saw it want to learn. The two top cultivators who had been bound by the water travel sword strike were no longer alive. They fell into the abyss like stone statues. Su Jin withdrew his sword that was soaked in divine blood. He panted heavily. It was obvious that after completely releasing these three sword intents, he no longer had the strength to fight. However, even so, his expression was still calm, as if he did not care about anything. He was already very satisfied with killing three top cultivators of the same realm with three sword strikes. At the same time, he recalled the figure with fluttering clothes in his divine sense. He was afraid that from now on, he would never be able to comprehend the subtlety of the second half of the flowing cloud grass sword style. Even the wind in the void quieted down, and it was completely silent. Immediately after, the voice of the old Grand Yen Immortal sounded, "Junior, tell me the sword Tao you cultivate and I will let you live. I will also let you cultivate under me. How about it?" The moment these words were said, all the Yen Immortals were in an uproar. To be able to gain the favor of a rank 3 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortal, his future cultivation path would definitely be extremely bright. This guy was only a top cultivator. If he agreed, breaking through to the Yen Immortal realm was just around the corner. In an instant, many Yen Immortals were envious. Su Jin laughed. He seemed to be extremely happy, and his clear voice resounded in the void. However, in the next moment, he returned to normal, and his clear eyes were filled with disdain. "You think you're worthy?" All the Yen Immortals were stunned. They could not believe that a small top cultivator would give up such a generous offer and even insult the Grand Yen Immortal. Just when all the Yen Immortals thought that the old Grand Yen Immortal would be furious, they did not expect him to be expressionless, as though he was not scolding them. "Since you don't want to tell me the sword Tao you cultivate, I won't force you. Tell me the name of the creator of the sword Tao, and I'll let you live. How about it?" The elderly Grand Yen Immortal slowly spoke with a gentle tone. Su Jin smiled coldly and glanced at him from the corner of his eyes. Then he sheathed his sword. "If my master's name reaches your ears, it will dirty my master's name. No matter how stupid a disciple is, he would never do such a thing." He was ready to die. Before the elderly Grand Yen Immortal could get angry, a voice that seemed to descend from the 9 heavens sounded. "Since you want to know my name so much, why don't I tell you myself?" All the Yen Immortals were terrified. They all looked behind them as if they were facing a great enemy. A black-robed ranger slowly walked over from the silent shattered void. His entire body was covered in majestic divine patterns, exuding an indescribable aura that even Yen Immortals could not look straight at. 2 figures followed closely behind him. One of them was a bald giant that was as sturdy as a divine mountain. He was rubbing his fists and rubbing his palms, as if he was waiting for an order before he would go all out. The other figure held a silver spear in his hand. His arrogant aura was obvious, and he was filled with an invincible aura. All the Yen Immortals held their breaths as they watched this scene. It's heavenly official Jian. In the 6 heavens realm, the few remaining Yen Immortals shouted at the same time, their eyes red. "Heavenly official Jian! Heavenly official Jian!" At this moment, all the remaining top cultivators in the 6 heavens realm spontaneously shouted. That was a reaction that would only appear when a trace of life appeared in a desperate situation. Chun Qiu clenched his fists tightly, unable to suppress the excitement in his heart. Big Brother Jin. Big Brother Jin is back. Cui Jing waved his arms and shouted excitedly. Wei Liujia let out a long breath. He felt that the hideous wounds on his body no longer hurt. Prince Qian, who had been waiting for an opportunity to escape, felt relieved when he saw this. However, he was still prepared to escape, because he didn't think that a mere Yen immortal would be able to turn this situation around. The disdain and coldness in the eyes of the young man holding the true sword in front of the Six Heavens realm disappeared and were replaced by respect and anticipation. Upon seeing this scene, the old Grand Yen immortal, who was originally somewhat bewildered, immediately snorted. Such a puny little Yen immortal was just someone that could be easily crushed. Now that he had killed the 9 revolutions Grand Yen immortal protecting the 6 heavens, he was confident that no other Grand Yen immortal on the battlefield could resist him. Thinking of this, he lazily extended a finger and ordered, "Crush them!" However, this time a considerable portion of the Yen immortals did not move. They all looked at each other. This was because they noticed that their great heavenly official was actually standing behind that mysterious figure. "Why haven't you attacked yet?" The elderly Grand Yen immortal roared angrily. His voice seemed to want to tear the void apart again. But next, among the 800+ Yen immortals, 300 of them looked ahead and nodded solemnly. Behind Jian Wushuang, Xu Yang, who was wearing flowing cloud silver armor and holding a silver spear, took a step forward and said in a serious voice, "Anyone who listens to me, Xu Yang, will leave the battlefield immediately." His voice shook the void and caused ripples. When the 300+ Yen immortals heard this order, they all rushed toward Xu Yang without any hesitation. Immediately, the mighty army of Yen immortals was left with only 400 or so, nearly half of the numbers before. "Xu Yang, how dare you?" The old Grand Yen immortal was extremely furious. In his eyes, Xu Yang was still just an ant. Since he was an ant, he had to listen to him on the battlefield. However, at this critical juncture, Xu Yang actually retreated at the last minute. How could he not be furious? Xu Yang looked at him calmly and said in a clear voice, "I have an urgent order. I have no choice but to leave. We will not accompany you in this battle." When the old Grand Yen immortal heard this, he was furious beyond words. "I'll see if you dare to leave." After he finished speaking, he waved his arms. Immediately, a chain-like light shot out from his palms and went straight for those Yen immortals. In the next moment, something unexpected happened. Jian Wushuang's figure quietly blocked behind the retreating Yen immortals, and then he pointed his finger. In an instant, millions of rays of light burst out and collided with each other. The two collided, and the shattered void was torn apart again, creating a 1,000-foot-deep abyss. The extremely beautiful light illuminated the entire void, and even the nearby Yen immortals retreated tens of thousands of feet. The aged Grand Yen immortal's turbid eyes widened to the maximum at this moment. He could not believe that a mere Yen immortal could block his furious attack. After the light faded, Jian Wushuang, whose clothes were still intact, looked at him calmly and then turned to Xu Yang. Xu Yang took a deep breath and cupped his hands solemnly. "Brother Wu, take care." After he finished speaking, he brought the 300+ Nan immortals and headed straight for the Immortal formation, disappearing very quickly. At this point, there were only 400+ Yen immortals and a rank 3 Grand Yen immortal left in the void battleground. On the battlefield, a large space was suddenly cleared. The remaining Yen immortals and top cultivators of the 6 heavens realm heaved a sigh of relief. Prince Qian calmed down and looked at Jian Wushuang in confusion. He did not quite understand. With the appearance of that guy, this war seemed to be reversed. No, impossible, a mere Yen immortal wanted to turn the tables? It was simply nonsense. Prince Qian shook his head in denial. Then, he seemed to remember something. His eyes widened in shock. Then, he hurriedly went to Chen Qing, who was the closest to him, and asked nervously, "Is that heavenly official Jian of yours the one who killed Chong Duoling alone?" Chen Qing glanced at him and unconsciously tugged at the jade belt around his waist. He said arrogantly, "That's right. Chong Duoling is nothing. Watch how heavenly official Jian will turn the tide." Prince Qian slowly let out a breath of turbid air. He was also beginning to look forward to what kind of monster the heavenly official Jian was. This was the man who was able to fight against the Grand Yen Immortal with the power of the Yen Immortal. The void returned to silence as all the Yen Immortals stared at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang looked past them and fixed his eyes on the old Grand Yen Immortal. The familiar scene seemed to be happening again. The battle with Chang Duoling was also the same. The only change was that this old Grand Yen Immortal seemed to have been a 3 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal for a long time. The old man seemed to be even more unfathomable than Chang Duoling. The battle with him was inevitable and Jian Wushuang felt that it was a tricky situation. Another guy who wants to die. Forget it. I'll completely destroy the 6 heavens realm today to prevent future trouble. The old Grand Yen Immortal said in a deep voice. At the same time, a scepter condensed in his palm and he slammed the void. All Yen Immortals, listen up. Destroy the 6 heavens with all your might. Don't leave a single Yen Immortal alive. The Yen Immortal army seemed to be impatient. After receiving the order, they rushed towards the 6 heavens realm. Just then, Jian Wushuang's cold voice rang out. If you don't want to die, go back the way you came. After he finished speaking, several sword intents shot out from his hand and flew forward. A few of the fastest Yen Immortals had their immortal sources shattered, turning into dust. However, this was not enough to stop the army. Nearly 400 of them descended from the sky like dark clouds. Looking back at Di Qing and the others who were heavily injured and could no longer fight, Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows slightly and then took a step forward resolutely. He was facing the army of Yen Immortals alone. Every single Yen Immortal in the 6 heavens realm, every single peak cultivator, all clenched their fists. With his own strength, could he really withstand this attack? It was as if the mountains and seas were about to collapse onto him. In the next moment, Jian Wushuang, who was all alone, suddenly had divine patterns all over his body. His entire body seemed to be made of billion sword intents, which was extremely dazzling and magnificent. The entire void began to tremble violently. The Yen Immortal who participated in that battle, when they saw this scene, were all shocked and excited to the extreme. It was an incomprehensible strike, an unstoppable strike. It was a sword strike that could destroy the heavenly Tao and no immortal could resist. The power that was emitted from that sword strike even caused all the Yen Immortals who participated in that battle to have a misconception. Even an emperor would find it difficult to escape unscathed from that sword strike. That sword strike was so shocking that it made the immortal lord of the 9 heavens, Chang Duoling, despair and die. It had even become the nightmare in the depths of the hearts of those who had escaped the battlefield. The sword strike that had surpassed the knowledge of every Yen Immortal and even Grand Yen Immortal. It was about to arrive once again. Wushuang Sword Dao. Star River Lake Ocean Sword Intent. 3rd move. Lake. This was the most magnificent sword move and its birth was far beyond Jian Wushuang's expectations. There wasn't even a single framework that could completely restrain it. The entire Wushuang Sword Dao had reached an insurmountable height because of this sword intent. A heavenly gate that illuminated the void for billions of miles slowly appeared. This could no longer be described as magnificent. Even the power of the Grand Yen Immortal was like a firefly competing with the bright moon under the heavenly gate. This magnificent gate was made of endless sword intent, and it was extremely pure. In the next moment, the heavenly gate that seemed to have been sealed for countless years slowly opened. A quiet lake that seemed to have been sealed for countless years flowed out. Jian Wushuang held the invisible sword and stepped into the gate. The lake flowed in the void like a clear spring. The sun, moon, and stars were born in it. All the Yen Immortals who saw this scene were furious. No matter how crazy they were, no matter how desperate they were, they could still feel that extremely terrifying aura. Even the elderly Grand Yen Immortal, who was at the outermost perimeter, had his eyes wide open at this moment. His murky eyes were filled with terror and disbelief. Even he did not know how to describe this sword move. The radiance from the heavenly gate was extremely resplendent. When it bloomed like a great sun, a true shadow walked out. It was a true shadow forged from pure sword intent. The radiance of his sword intent was so brilliant that it eclipsed everything else. He led the sword with his hand and arrived from the heavenly gate. Even the heavenly Tao was prostrating at his feet. This sword had even surpassed the knowledge of the old Grand Yen Immortal. This was supposed to be just a sword move of the legends, but it was actually materialized. At this moment when the light was extremely bright, the old Grand Yen Immortal finally thought of a phrase to describe it. This strike was like the rage of an emperor. It was so huge that it seemed to be made of the heavenly river. It cut through the void and destroyed the heavenly Tao. All tangible objects were completely turned into dust at this moment. The void had entered the deepest level of collapse. Even the uncontrollable void gales were torn apart. With the giant sword as the center, the void was torn apart and formed a violent vortex, crazily swallowing everything. Even the Yen power could not escape. Under this sword move, even the other heavenly regions billions of miles away were affected. They all began to shatter and be destroyed. The 400+ Yen immortals that walked out of the immortal array formation were all killed by this sword strike. Not a single one of them could escape. A single sword strike had killed 400 immortals. The old Grand Yen Immortal had long been scared out of his wits. He had even fled with all his might the moment those 400 Yen immortals were annihilated. But could he escape? The void battleground had gone out of control. All the heavenly regions outside the Six Heavens realm had been destroyed and turned into dust. Originally, the Six Heaven realm could not avoid being killed by this sword strike. However, Di Qing woke up and used his damaged true life to block Jian Wushuang's sword strike. Di Qing, who was a 9 revolutions grand immortal and had walked out of the era when Jin Wuyang proclaimed himself emperor, felt a throb in the depths of his heart when he saw Jian Wushuang and his sword strike. This sword strike had even threatened him. Di Qing endured the dizziness in his head and looked at the true shadow that made the heavenly Tao prostrate under his feet. His eyes became clearer and brighter. This sword strike lasted for quite a long time. When the Wushuang sword intent turned into a lake and returned to the heavenly gate, the true shadow standing in the void slowly opened its eyes. Everything turned to dust as far as the eye could see, including the heavenly Tao. Even the void had turned into the most primitive state of chaos, filled with indescribable silence. At this moment, there were only a dozen Yen immortals and 1,000 peak cultivators left in the void battleground. Without exception, their eyes were lifeless as they looked ahead in a daze, as if they had not recovered from the scene just now. The 400+ Yen immortal army had been completely crushed into dust. Not even a single immortal source or immortal bone was left behind, as if they had never appeared. Opposite Jian Wushuang, there was only a lonely figure. At this moment, there was only fear in his turbid eyes, as if he had just survived a disaster. All dead, the elderly Grand Yen Immortal muttered. Following that, a wisp of divine blood gushed out from the corner of his mouth. He tried his best to escape, but in the end, he was still a step too late and suffered the most serious injuries. It had been many years since he had tasted the feeling of being severely injured. Now he had truly tasted it again. He even believed that if he had not avoided in time, his immortal body would have shattered and his immortal source would have been destroyed. The power of the sword strike terrified him. At the same time, the old Grand Yen Immortal was puzzled. How could a puny little Yen Immortal release such a sword move that was like the rage of an emperor? Slowly moving forward, Jian Wushuang, who was standing with his hands behind his back, finally arrived in front of him. The old Grand Yen Immortal raised his head and looked at him with uncertainty in his eyes. Finally, he said, "I heard earlier that there was a Yen Immortal in the 6 heavens who killed the immortal lord of the 9 heavens, Chang Duoling, by himself. Was it you?" "It's me." Jian Wushuang nodded. He did not plan to hide it because he would not let him leave alive. "Was the sword intent you used to kill Chang Duoling this time?" "That's right." After the old Grand Yen Immortal obtained this answer, his expression changed a few times before he finally said desolately, "I originally thought that the rumor was nonsense. Now, it seems that Chang Duoling was indeed killed by you. To be able to die under that sword strike, his death was not in vain. One last question. Did you create this sword strike? Or did you receive the inheritance of a certain emperor? He asked, his eyes solemn. Jian Wushuang looked at him and said calmly, I created it. I didn't receive any inheritance. The old Grand Yen Immortal trembled. His murky pupils also became somewhat bright at this moment. He seemed to have entered a certain state, from fear to calmness. You're only at the Yen Immortal stage, but you're able to comprehend this sword move and even kill a Grand Yen Immortal. I can't imagine how far you'll go in the future. If you don't participate in these disputes and live well, I'm afraid you'll become an existence that will stir up the entire Great Sea region or beyond. But you must also know that if you are too stunning, you will definitely be killed. I can also foresee that your future will definitely be too difficult. If I am lucky enough to survive today, I would like to see how far you will go in the future, and whether you will completely overturn the Great Sea region. The old Grand Yen Immortal looked at him and said with emotion, You are very different. Jian Wushuang also looked at him, and an invisible sword had already condensed in his palm. No matter what, the enemies who witnessed his sword attack could not leave alive, especially the Grand Yen Immortal. Jian Wushuang had never thought that Zhen Wuyang and the entire heavenly court were good people, so he walked around cautiously. If there was a Grand Yen Immortal who went up to the heavenly court, all the unfavorable factors would probably be pressed against him. If Zhen Wuyang, who had defeated nearly 10 emperors and established the heavenly court, wanted to kill him, he could do it with a finger. Therefore, he had to eliminate it from the source. The old Grand Yen Immortal could not leave this place alive. Looks like you don't plan to let me leave? He asked. Jian Wushuang nodded. Yes. Since that's the case, then I'll fight one last time. The old Grand Yen Immortal seemed to have let go and was prepared to fight. He had already been injured by the sword strike earlier. He was already confident that he would definitely die in this battle. Jian Wushuang did not dare to underestimate the old man either. Although he had already killed 2 Grand Yen Immortals, he still did not dare to underestimate them. There was an essential difference between the Yen Immortal and the Grand Yen Immortal. If he was not careful, Jian Wushuang might be seriously injured. Right now, this old Grand Yen Immortal was a 3 revolutions expert. He was much higher than Yu Yun, so he could not let his guard down. As he took a step forward, the black robe on his body surged, and thousands of strands of energy flowed around his body like chains, filled with earth-shaking power. This was the power of a Grand Yen Immortal, causing even the Yen Immortal to tremble. Jian Wushuang was not afraid. He held the invisible sword in his hand and confronted him brazenly. At this moment, all the Yen Immortals and peak cultivators in the 6 Heavens realm were watching this scene solemnly. The battle between the Yen Immortal and the Grand Yen Immortal, this extremely unfair and almost impossible scene, happened. This battle would be deeply imprinted in the hearts of every top cultivator and every Yen Immortal. Even they did not know how far-reaching the impact of this battle was. All my life, I had never seen someone as graceful as you. Even that lofty existence seemed a little dejected when you appeared. That sword move of yours was too domineering and terrifying. Even I couldn't face it, but even so, I still need this battle. I want to see with my own eyes what kind of surprise you will bring me with your grace. The old Grand Yen Immortal spoke slowly. His expression had already become excited, as if he had returned to the ancient times. The corners of Jian Wushuang's mouth curled up, and his sword-like eyebrows sank. Then, 36,000 sword intents suddenly burst out from his back and twisted forward. Good! He shouted in a deep voice. At the same time, the chains that covered his body all rose up, like true dragons. 36,000 sword intents, all of them were peak sword strikes. They were nothing to scoff at, even against Grand Yen Immortals. A terrifying energy burst out, causing chaos in the void battleground once again. The pitch-black chains were rapidly breaking apart. In the end, they were destroyed at the same time. When the brilliance of the Yen power dissipated, Jian Wushuang had already quietly arrived in front of the old Grand Yen Immortal. Jian Wushuang's gaze was calm as he faced such a Grand Yen Immortal. He raised the invisible sword in his hand and slashed down. The old Grand Yen Immortal blocked it in time. At the same time, An extremely pitch-black true shadow appeared behind him and crazily devoured Jian Wushuang. At the same time, Jian Wushuang's selfless true shadow, which was emitting an azure blue intent, augmented his body. When the pitch-black true shadow touched the selfless true shadow, it immediately emitted a large amount of black smoke before retracting back into his body. The appearance of this scene shocked the old Grand Yen Immortal even more. He had already tempered his divine thoughts to the peak, yet he was unable to corrode Jian Wushuang? Could it be that he is also tempering his divine thought? Naturally, Jian Wushuang did not know what he was thinking at the moment. He was not the one who initiated the enhancement of selfless true shadow. The selfless true shadow seemed to have a certain level of self-awareness. When its main body was harmed by external forces, it would automatically strengthen itself, which also prevented it from being harmed by its divine thoughts. However, even without the automatic protection of the selfless true shadow, the divine thought erosion released by the old Grand Yen Immortal just now would definitely not be able to erode him. When Jian Wushuang ascended to the position of Cosmos God in the Divine Power universe, his divine thoughts had already reached mastery. No external force could interfere with his thoughts. Therefore, Jian Wushuang's fighting posture was very reckless. He swung his sword and slashed heavily. Sparks flew everywhere. It was as if he was forging a sword. The old Grand Yen Immortal was like a sword embryo that was constantly being tempered. If there was a closer observer, they would be able to see the obvious changes. Jian Wushuang's expression was calm. Every sword strike could easily shatter a heavenly region. The face of the Grand Yen Immortal, who had endured the tempering, gradually turned red. He could not even resist and could only endure it silently. This shocking scene was completely reflected in the eyes of all the Yen Immortals and top cultivators in the Six Heavens realm. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. The one who was the most shocked was Prince Qian. His eyes were wide open as he murmured, What is this guy doing? He's too scary." Even though Prince Qian was the son of an emperor, he had never seen such a scene before. Su Jin, who was all alone, had his eyes on Jian Wushuang. He was trying his best to comprehend the sword moves. At the same time, he was fantasizing about when he would be able to fight alongside Jian Wushuang. Today's battle had left an indelible mark in the hearts of all the top cultivators and Yen Immortals. With his own strength, he turned the tide. That kind of back view had long conquered many silent hearts. With the help of the selfless true shadow, Jian Wushuang completely crushed the severely injured Grand Yen Immortal. Under the heavy blows again and again, wisps of divine blood flowed out of the corner of his mouth again. The old Grand Yen Immortal already knew that his final destination was to die under this man's sword. He even regretted not choosing the right path. If he had fallen under that earth-shaking sword intent, he would have died with dignity. However, if he died in such a situation, he would probably become a laughingstock for all eternity. As a Grand Yen Immortal of the Great Sea region, he could not accept this result. "Junior, you deserve to die." He was furious and sent Jian Wushuang flying far away at the risk of his immortal body being injured. The invisible sword in his hand shattered. Jian Wushuang put his right hand behind his back and looked at him calmly. His right hand, which was behind his back, was already dripping with divine blood, dripping drop by drop into his clothes. He had underestimated the might of a Grand Yen Immortal. If he had not dodged in time, he would have been even more severely injured. "Junior, don't underestimate this old man. Although this old man is injured, it doesn't mean that I don't have the strength to fight," the old Grand Yen Immortal said angrily. Jian Wushuang ignored him and raised his palm. The chaotic void shook and 100,000 sword intents appeared behind him. Each sword intent carried an extremely terrifying power. There were a total of 100,000 swords, all of which were the strongest attacks. Looking at the 100,000 sword intents that were like a forest of swords, the elderly Grand Yen Immortal turned solemn. In the endless years until now, he had seen too many Yen Immortals and even Grand Yen Immortals in the ancient Moon era. However, the only one he had never seen was a sword cultivator. The so-called sword cultivator was actually a very vague term. After reaching the level of the Yen Immortal, Very few Yen Immortals would rely on external objects to improve themselves. However, this was not absolute. Among them, there were Yen Immortals who opened up the way of the sword and controlled the true sword to break through the bottleneck. The result of doing so was two completely different outcomes. The bad result was that it would drag down one's cultivation, and the path of cultivation would fall into chaos, making it difficult for one to improve in their lifetime. The good result would be that he would far surpass his peers at the same level and become a heaven's favorite. However, even the extremely experienced Grand Yen Immortal had never seen such a rare prodigy. The only prodigy he acknowledged was the Supreme Existence who walked out of the Forsaken Land and single-handedly pacified the chaotic region and finally became an emperor. However, even that Supreme Existence purely cultivated himself and did not cultivate external things. Therefore, Jian Wushuang, who had already reached the peak of sword principle, gave the old Grand Yen Immortal the same shock as when he first met the emperor. This was the second heaven's favorite he had acknowledged, and he was also an existence that was about to take his life. Jian Wushuang stood opposite him and pointed his finger. In an instant, 100,000 sword intents swept out and stabbed toward the old Grand Yen Immortal. The void was bright. The shockwave that erupted caused even Yen Immortals to be unable to stand still. Jian Wushuang stood where he was and looked calmly at the center of the explosion. He did not think that it could kill a Grand Evolution Immortal. As if to confirm his guess, the sword intent that was still wildly leaking out completely stopped at this moment. Then, the void distorted, and a barrier ring appeared. It was like a black hole that directly swallowed all the sword intent that was still leaking out, forcefully changing the battle situation. When the 100,000 sword intents completely dissipated, the elderly Grand Yen Immortal holding the black scepter slowly appeared. That black hole-like barrier ring was released from the scepter, avoiding the attack of the sword intents. Even so, the sword intent still more or less injured him. At this moment, the old Grand Yen Immortal was no longer passive and chose to attack first. He held the pitch-black scepter in his hand, and his entire body shot forward like a bolt of lightning. Jian Wushuang tried to resist but was immediately sent flying by the overwhelming force. At the same time, hundreds of true dragon-like chains extended from his back, crazily pouring down. Even Jian Wushuang found it hard to resist the waves of powerful attacks. The old Grand Yen Immortal looked like he had returned to his youth. He swung his fists that could easily tear the heavenly region apart and punched his immortal body again and again. 1,000,000 punches in an instant. In just a few dozen breaths, their fight had reached a terrifying level. The chaotic void seemed to have been squeezed to the extreme by the Yen power. Jian Wushuang could feel that his immortal body was beginning to shatter, and there were fine cracks on his chest. If they continued to fight like this, it was very likely that he would not be a match. Jian Wushuang made a prompt decision and took the Grand Yen Immortal move head-on, using it to distance himself. Enduring the intense pain in his immortal body, the 7 stars between his eyebrows slowly circulated. Immortal style, Little Mountain River. In this immortal style, all the rules of mountains and rivers were used by Jian Wushuang. As Jian Wushuang waved his hand, a divine mountain suddenly grew out of the void and blocked the old Grand Yen Immortal. Another water dragon appeared, roaring and crushing down. Seeing this, the old Grand Evolution Immortal was shocked again. He had thought that Jian Wushuang had only trained his sword principle to the peak. He did not expect that he had even mastered an immortal style. One had to know that once the Yen Immortal grasped the immortal style, it meant that if nothing went wrong, he would definitely ascend to the position of the Grand Yen Immortal. He did not dare to imagine how far a sword cultivator who had attained the Grand Yen Immortal stage would go. Recovering from his shock, the old Grand Yen Immortal still launched his attack. With a punch, the divine mountain shattered and the celestial river was cut off. He stepped on the void and rushed forward. Behind him, many chains covered the sky and covered the earth, trying to kill Jian Wushuang. Facing the Grand Yen Immortal's full-strength attack, Jian Wushuang slowly exhaled a mouthful of turbid breath and then released the Wushuang Sword Dao again. Star River Lake Ocean Sword Intent. Second move. River. The torrent surged like a heavenly river pouring down from the horizon. It carried an unimaginable force as it tore through the chaos and rushed toward the old Grand Yen Immortal. This sword river was completely formed by countless sword intents. It was the most powerful sword intent that established the Star River Lake Ocean sword intent. Standing at the top of the sword river tide, Jian Wushuang was no longer indifferent. He had a solemn expression on his face. This sword move of his would definitely heavily injure the old Grand Yen Immortal. He could then kill the old man. This war had been going on for quite a long time, and they could not wait any longer. And killing the old Grand Yen Immortal was the final declaration of the end. At this moment, all the top cultivators and Yen Immortals in the Six Heavens realm were extremely nervous. Could this sword strike kill a Grand Yen Immortal? The chaotic void was instantly swept away by a huge force. Under the impact, it split and shattered again. The boundless light of the Yen power lit up the entire void battleground. The afterglow of the Yen power flowed in the air like a tassel. The vast and majestic river sword intent swept across the void, almost swallowing the entire void. The Yen power pillar released by the old Grand Yen Immortal could no longer withstand it and was directly swallowed by the sword intent from all directions. The void was deathly silent, and only the river of swordsmanship surged. Victory, victory! A top cultivator could not help but say excitedly. Prince Qian, who had almost escaped death, was the most excited at this moment. The hundreds of Yen Immortals under him had all died, but he was still alive. He did not even lose much of his Yen energy. This was something he did not dare to think about before. He was even prepared to be seriously injured and captured. But now everything was settled. Prince Qian shouted excitedly, "Motherfucker! Heavenly official Jian is unparalleled in the world, like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples." All the top cultivators and Yen Immortals in the Six Heavens realm shouted, "Heavenly official Jian! Unparalleled in the world! Heavenly official Jian! Unparalleled in the world!" Their voices shook the void. They had won this battle. This was an unimaginable battle, with close to 1,000 Yen Immortals and 2 Grand Yen Immortals joining in. The Six Heavens realm only had 100 or so Yen Immortals. Facing the assault of nearly 1,000 Yen Immortals, they actually managed to protect the Six Heavens realm. This was an unimaginable and inconceivable battle. However, every surviving Yen Immortal and peak cultivator knew that without those two, this would not have happened. All the voices that they shouted out were the true thoughts in their hearts. However, Di Qing was the only one who looked at Jian Wushuang with a serious expression. He looked at the void where the celestial river flowed out. He had a premonition that the Grand Yen Immortal would not die so easily. Jian Wushuang did not relax. He was still staring at the center of the sword river. It was good that this sword strike could kill him, but if it couldn't, they would have to fight again. When the sword river completely dissipated, a figure that could barely stand still appeared. His immortal body was almost on the verge of shattering. Dark Yen power spread out from his body and then dissipated into the void. It could be seen that his immortal source was about to dissipate. Jian Wushuang heaved a sigh of relief. The collapse of the immortal source was an irreversible sign of death even for a Grand Yen Immortal. The old Grand Yen Immortal was about to die. Although he was about to lose his balance, he still straightened his body and looked at Jian Wushuang. "You have far exceeded my expectations." This old man is utterly convinced of his defeat. After saying this, he knelt in the void listlessly as if he was waiting for his death. "But I still want to live." Jian Wushuang walked forward slowly. He did not hate the old Grand Yen Immortal. He was calm. The reason why he had stepped forward was to ensure that he would not release his divine thought to escape. Just when Jian Wushuang was less than 3 meters away from the old Grand Yen Immortal, the old man, who had been waiting to die with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes. Then, with an unimaginable speed, he shot toward Jian Wushuang like a thunderbolt. Everything happened so fast that Jian Wushuang could not react in time. A black and extremely sharp scepter ruthlessly stabbed into his heart. The old Grand Yen Immortal's previous decline was gone. His eyes were filled with madness and pride. "Junior, although you are very strong, you are still a little too inexperienced. Are you so sure that I don't even have the chance to counterattack?" Looking down at the black scepter in front of his chest, Jian Wushuang's calm eyes showed some fluctuations. Then, he said faintly, "Idiot, you didn't stab in." The old Grand Yen Immortal was stunned and immediately looked at his hand subconsciously. Crack. Immediately after, the sound of crystals breaking could be heard. The black scepter was instantly covered in cracks and shattered from the tip. No, impossible. How could my scepter be like this? The old Grand Yen Immortal was shocked. He did not dare to imagine what had happened. "Do you think I'm not prepared?" Jian Wushuang said calmly. At the same time, he waved his hand and tore off the torn black robe on his body, emitting a dark blue glow. Every piece of azure blue armor leaf seemed to have a life of its own. It was rhythmically moving, and it was extremely beautiful. This is Chang Duoling's mystic garb of the 9 heavens? The old Grand Yen Immortal was extremely frightened. He finally understood why his scepter had not dealt any serious damage to Jian Wushuang. There was a rumor in the entire Great Sea region that the immortal lord of the 9 heavens Chang Duoling had a supreme treasure that could resist all external forces and could even block a full-powered attack from an emperor. It was rumored that the mystic garb of the 9 heavens was only blue in color and was formed from 99,000 armor leaves. It was extremely beautiful. Wasn't the azure armor on Jian Wushuang Chang Duoling's mystic garb of the 9 heavens? The old Grand Yen Immortal felt the divine blood in his body turn cold. He had never expected Jian Wushuang to wear the mystic garb of the 9 heavens and withstand his attack. Jian Wushuang's eyes were filled with ridicule. He allowed the black scepter in front of his chest to shatter completely. Then, he reached out and grabbed the neck of the old Grand Yen Immortal. "Chang Duoling was killed by you? Did you also steal his mystic garb of the 9 heavens?" There was no fighting spirit in his eyes, only despair. "I didn't want to take his mystic garb of the 9 heavens. He gave it to me at the last moment," Jian Wushuang said. When the old Grand Yen Immortal heard this, he seemed to have sensed something. He suddenly grinned. That's right. Who wouldn't love a prodigy like you when they're about to die? We don't have any blood feud, so this battle doesn't have to happen. But since it's irreversible, I'll make one last request." He looked at Jian Wushuang and said, "I want to kill myself." "No." Jian Wushuang refused without hesitation. Originally, he had some compassion for him, but if Jian Wushuang had not put on the mystic garb of the 9 heavens in advance, he would have been severely injured and even his immortal body would have been shattered. The old Grand Yen Immortal also knew the reason. He had no face to ask for anything else. He could only close his eyes and die. Jian Wushuang did not hesitate anymore. Thousands of sword intents appeared in his right palm and then hit his immortal body. The sword intent surged wildly and tore the old Grand Yen Immortal apart without any obstruction. The immortal source was destroyed, and the immortal body turned into dust and scattered in the void. A 3 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal had fallen at Jian Wushuang's hands. At this point, this battle that involved almost all 5 princes ended with the loss of over 1,000 Yen Immortals. This battle was the most intense battle since Zhen Wuyang opened up the Great Sea region. Countless heavenly regions and countless living beings disappeared silently in this battle. Even the Yen Immortals died, as if they had no value. Not only did the Yen Immortal die for nothing, even Grand Yen Immortals died because of it. Immortal Lord of the 9 heavens Chang Duoling, Death Immortal Yu Yun, and the old Grand Yen Immortal were all killed by Jian Wushuang in this battle. This could no longer be described as a battle between ordinary imperial princes. If the degree of destruction was unleashed, only the heavenly court, which was guarded by Zhen Wuyang, could control the situation. When this earth-shattering battle finally came to an end, the originally silent void battleground once again erupted with earth-shattering shouts. Heavenly Official Jian, unparalleled in the world. Heavenly Official Jian, unparalleled in the world. Jian Wushuang, who had his back facing the 6 skies realm, suddenly turned pale. Then, a wisp of divine blood flowed out of the corner of his mouth and dripped onto the mystic garb of the 9 heavens. It was quickly absorbed. In the end, he still underestimated the sinister and terrifying nature of that old Grand Yen Immortal. If he had not put on the mystic garb of the 9 heavens in advance, just the final attack would have been enough to shatter his immortal body. The full-strength attack of a rank 3 grand yen immortal was still terrifying. Fortunately, he wore the mystic garb of the 9 heavens, so he was not heavily injured. At the same time, what shocked Jian Wushuang was that he had pierced the mystic garb of the 9 heavens at the heart area previously. If the attack of the old grand yen immortal had deviated by an inch, Jian Wushuang would not have been able to escape the fate of being destroyed. The battlefield was ever-changing, and the outcome could be reversed at any moment. However, there was only one outcome. Jian Wushuang stood alone in the void, as if he was suppressing the world. Jian Wushuang was unparalleled in the world. All the cultivators and yen immortals rushed toward Jian Wushuang. Brother Jian! Brother Jian! Big Brother Jian! At this moment, Chun Xiu, Cui Jing, Chen Qing, Wei Liujia, and Zhao Ting all cupped their hands and greeted him with sincere smiles. Even Di Qing, who had always been calm and extremely arrogant, nodded at Jian Wushuang. Wushuang, you did well. Looking at the faces of those who had fought a bloody battle, Jian Wushuang smiled from the bottom of his heart. Then, he cupped his hands solemnly. Everyone, we won. All the top cultivators cheered. Su Jin, who was the most inconspicuous, looked at Jian Wushuang from afar with slightly red eyes. He did not know when he could catch up to Jian Wushuang, and he did not dare to expect it. He could only watch from afar. Perhaps one day in the future, he would be qualified to stand by his side. If it weren't for the chaotic and broken void, Chun Qing and Feng Shan would have lifted Jian Wushuang up and cheered. Immediately after, the thin purple-robed man who was hugging the young emperor rushed over from the chaotic void. Both of them were covered in divine blood and were about to die. When Jian Wushuang saw this scene and was about to speak, the last immortal array formation that had been silent suddenly flowed with immortal patterns. 100,000 immortal patterns circulated, and the chaotic void was illuminated at this moment. At this moment, all the yen immortals and peak cultivators had solemn expressions. They were all clear that the circulation of the immortal array formation indicated that there would be another army arriving at the battlefield. The excitement on their faces had yet to fade, but it was replaced by bitterness. The skinny man in purple robe came to Jian Wushuang with the young emperor in his arms. He looked extremely old. Heavenly official Jian, retreat. We can't afford to lose any more of our remaining forces. Jian Wushuang was silent. The top cultivators and the yen immortals behind him were also silent, waiting for him to make the final decision. At this moment, a cold and disdainful voice sounded from the immortal array. You want to retreat? Dream on. As this voice resounded through the void, yen immortals with vast and powerful energy flowing around them walked out of the immortal array. Even Jian Wushuang's heart sank when he saw this. Another few hundred yen immortals arrived at the void battleground. A whole 100 full of evolved immortals entered the battlefield. This was a crushing blow to the 6 heavens realm and the others who had almost no strength to fight. Di Qing was already heavily injured while Chun Xiu, Chen Qing, and the other yen immortals were all more or less heavily injured. They no longer had the strength to fight. As for top cultivators, to a yen immortal, they were practically dispensable existences. In the entire 6 heavens realm, Jian Wushuang was the only one who could still fight. The 100 yen immortals who walked out of the immortal array formation scattered the moment they appeared in the void battleground. They surrounded them all, obviously not planning to let any of them go. When the immortal array formation was finally destroyed, a valiant yen immortal dressed in scarlet gold armor walked out. He was surrounded by the heavenly Tao, and even the heavenly Tao submitted to him. His extremely handsome face was filled with supreme authority and was extremely terrifying. Jian Wushuang's eyes narrowed when he saw him. This valiant yen immortal wearing scarlet gold armor was none other than the 3rd prince under Jin Wuyang, Prince Yu. He was the representative of arrogance. During the battle for the immortal peach in the heavenly court, he had wanted to break the restriction of the immortal peach by himself and monopolize the immortal peach. In the end, he was eliminated. Then, he was defeated by Jian Wushuang in the former heavenly court of Emperor Luya and was almost beaten half to death. Now that he had appeared in the void battleground, It showed that he was on the same side as Prince Zhou. Although Prince Yu was arrogant, he had already mastered the immortal style, so he could not be underestimated. Especially now, the pressure he emitted was extremely powerful. At this moment, even if he wanted to escape, it would be an extravagant hope. Prince Yu, who was standing on the heavenly Tao and clad in golden armor, looked at the remaining Yen immortals and peak cultivators from the Six Heavens realm with his heroic eyes. He could not help but sneer, especially when he saw the young emperor who was covered in blood and barely breathing. He could not help but laugh out loud. However, he quickly regained his cold expression and looked at the young emperor before speaking in a deep voice. Prince Yen, we have found the murderer who killed our fifth brother, and you are the murderer. Now, I will capture you and hand you over to Imperial Fater. Jian Wushuang did not expect Prince Yu would push the blame onto the young emperor. He was the one who had personally witnessed the battle to kill the emperor. Under the Fusong tree, Zhang Ying chopped off the head of the fifth prince, Prince Mo, and crushed his immortal source, causing him to die completely. Jian Wushuang guessed that the extremely mysterious Zhang Ying was most likely a mysterious Yen immortal under Prince Zhou. It was absolutely impossible that she was sent by the young emperor. Therefore, when Prince Yu pushed away the accusation, Jian Wushuang immediately concluded that he was just making a wild guess. The weak young emperor glanced at Prince Yu and turned around slowly. He looked at Jian Wushuang and said softly, "Brother Jian, you can leave. I want to see if they dare to kill me." Currently, there were only a dozen or so Yen immortals left and only 1,000 peak cultivators. Against the Yen immortal army that had re-entered the void battleground, they had no chance of fighting. Even with Jian Wushuang, it would be difficult to turn the situation around. However, it was not that they did not want to escape, but that they had no way to escape. They could only fight like trapped beasts. Jian Wushuang quickly sorted out several thoughts of escaping in his mind, but he rejected them all in the end. Di Qing and the others were more or less severely injured. If they left, they would be even more passive. After thinking for a moment, Jian Wushuang's voice transmission reached the ears of Di Qing and the others. "You guys go first. I'll stay behind to cover your retreat. Don't worry." Hearing this, they all looked a little dejected, but they knew that this was the best plan. If they continued to stay in the void battleground, it would be meaningless. At this moment, Prince Yu, who was clad in golden armor and stepping on the heavenly Tao, suddenly pulled out the true sword at his waist and pointed it at the sky. "Capture Prince Yen." In an instant, all the Yen immortals scattered around the void battleground released a majestic energy pillar. A total of 100 Yen immortals attacked. 100 streaks of energy surrounded them from all directions and trapped them almost instantly. Each of these energy pillars was a full-powered attack from a Yen immortal. It was almost impossible to break them. At this moment, even the void was illuminated. Prince Yu's eyes were filled with pride and hatred. Clearly, he still remembered the fight for the immortal peach in the heavenly court. Now he could finally wash away his shame. Facing the overwhelming attack, Jian Wushuang quietly closed his eyes. Countless tassel-like divine patterns quietly circulated around his body. Then, the selfless true shadow augmented his body, causing his entire body to emit a hazy light. In the next moment, he suddenly opened his eyes. Lightning and sword intent intertwined, and the true shadow of a huge sword condensed from pure sword intent appeared behind him. It stood upright in the void with an imposing manner that could not be looked at directly. The huge sword's true shadow was hundreds of millions of feet tall and could not be looked at directly. It was as if even the heavenly Tao could be destroyed by it. Jian Wushuang shouted in a low voice. He raised his arms and pressed them down as if he was holding the hilt of a sword. In an instant, the heavenly Tao vanished, and the primal chaos void collapsed once again. The huge sword projection tore through all obstacles and slashed down. Under this sword strike, the encirclement of 100 Yen immortals was shattered. It was as if a disaster had descended. All the Yen immortals looked at this scene in shock and even forgot to dodge. Under this sword, close to 20 Yen immortals were unable to escape in time and died on the spot. A hole was torn open in the encirclement. The void was plowed open with a crack that was hundreds of millions of miles long. and crazy void gales raged. "Leave quickly." Jian Wushuang stood with his hands behind his back and looked at them calmly. All of the top cultivators gritted their teeth and rushed toward the boundless void with all their might. Di Qing and Jian Wushuang looked at each other and nodded silently. Then, he took Chun Qiu and the others with them and flew into the void. At this point, in the entire void battleground, the number of top cultivators and Yen Immortals had decreased by more than half. Prince Yu was tongue-tied. He had not recovered from the scene just now. The scene just now was too shocking. Not only Prince Yu, but even the Yen Immortal army was still in shock. "You should leave too. I'll be there soon." Jian Wushuang looked at the young emperor and said in an unquestionable voice. However, he only smiled weakly. "Since you're here, I can't leave by myself. Prince Yu only wants my life, and it has nothing to do with you. If I stay here, at the very least, I can give you a way out." Jian Wushuang was silent. He understood what he meant. But before he could continue, the young emperor tidied his clothes and stepped forward. His handsome and charming face was cold. "Prince Yu, I, Prince Yen, am here. You can do whatever you want to me, but you have to let them go." After recovering from his shock, Prince Yu's eyes flashed with fear. He naturally recognized Jian Wushuang, the mysterious man who had defeated Prince Zhou in the heavenly court. Taking a deep breath, Prince Yu waved his hand. "Capture Prince Yen." In an instant, dozens of Yen Immortals surrounded him from all directions. In the next moment, something unexpected happened. A few of the fastest-charging Yen Immortals suddenly stopped on the spot, and their immortal bodies broke into countless pieces. Clang, the sound of metal clashing resounded in the air. Jian Wushuang, who was holding an invisible sword and had majestic divine patterns flowing around his body, walked forward slowly. He killed several Yen Immortals with one sword swing. It was terrifying to the extreme. Prince Yu subconsciously took a few steps back. He felt a lingering fear when he faced Jian Wushuang. Another Yen Immortal charged at Jian Wushuang brazenly, and the unparalleled Yen power crashed down. With a horizontal slash, the sword intent swept across, instantly swallowing that Yen Immortal, cleanly turning him into pieces. "Let's go," Jian Wushuang said in a deep voice as he came to the young emperor. He no longer hesitated. After nodding lightly, he prepared to leave. Seeing this, Prince Yu's eyes narrowed. "You want to leave? Stay here. All Yen Immortals, listen up. Trap them here at all costs. You can't let them go," he shouted. At this moment, there were more than 70 Yen Immortals left in the void battleground. They looked at each other and then flew toward Jian Wushuang. The strength of the 70-plus Yen Immortals was extremely shocking. The void shook and Jian Wushuang was slightly shocked. He still felt great pressure when facing so many Yen Immortals. After killing Death Immortal Yu Yun, he continued to fight with the old Grand Yen Immortal without stopping. It had already exhausted the energy in his immortal body to the extreme. In this situation, he was unable to release the lake-style sword intent. Jian Wushuang was already at the end of his rope. Facing so many Yen Immortals, all he could do was to let the young emperor and the thin purple-robed man escape from danger. Thinking of this, he suddenly threw the invisible sword in his hand. The dozen or so Yen Immortals who had been surrounding them saw this scene and hurriedly made way. The invisible sword tore a crack in the void. Then Jian Wushuang waved his arm and pushed the young emperor and the thin purple-robed man out. 1,000,000 miles in an instant. "We can't let Prince Yen escape," Prince Yu shouted anxiously, but he soon realized that Jian Wushuang was running toward him. An indescribable fear surged into his heart. He immediately lost his strength and hurriedly ordered all the Yen Immortals to return to protect him. The group of Yen Immortals who were chasing after the young emperor had no choice but to give up. They turned back and came to Prince Yu, controlling their Yen powers to surround Jian Wushuang.